23rd regular Board of County Commissioners work session, and we're going to start off on our agenda today with the Aspen Airport Business Center capital project funding discussion. And Brian Pettit and GR Fielding is here to do that.
Thank you, George. My name's GR. I am the county engineer. Today I'm joined by Brian Pettit, the Public Works Director, and Connie Garofalo, the Budget Director. We're going to talk about a few things regarding the ABC project. First, we'll go through a little bit of background, then we'll talk about how the project was budgeted, where our proposals came in for the project, and talk about a little bit about the funding shortfall that we have. But to begin, I would like to give a little bit of a background. We started planning this project in 2008, and the board at that time directed staff to integrate the planning for this road capital project with the AACP planning and the West of Maroon planning. Through that process, we got a lot of public input into what the people wanted the roadway system in the ABC to look like. And we integrated that into our engineering design that we have. We took that engineering design and put it out for proposals in last month in March. We received those proposals back, and our highest rated proposer had a bid that came in well over what we had budgeted. Our budget for 2013 for this project was $2.6 million. And to complete the project in full, we believe that we'll need $3.4 million. So that gives us a shortfall of about $800,000. There were several reasons for the shortfall that we saw. First was through the planning process, and one of the last iterations of design that we had, the board directed staff to add a detention pond and appurtenances to the detention pond to increase the water quality of the stormwater that will be being released from the ABC area. The second thing was pedestrian infrastructure that's been included with the project, including a couple small portions of sidewalk and also at-grade pedestrian amenities on the 300 and 200 roads in the ABC. And finally, the other reason for the increased costs is the rising construction costs that we've seen. And I know that's nothing new to the board, as this isn't the first time that staff has been in front of the board this year asking for additional money to be appropriated to complete a project because of the rising construction costs, particularly in the Upper Valley here in the Roaring Fork. And with that, I'll hand it over to Brian to go through a couple more of the details.
Yeah, I really don't have any other things to say about the project other than we feel it's necessary to do it this year based on moving in potentially the contractor twice. We talked about phasing the project into different years, but I think given the extensive public outreach that GR completed, there was a level of expectation put out in the public that we would get this job done and get it done in a manner that in a quick manner. And this is slated to be done this year. If we were to phase it, we draw it out into 2 years, and I just, that impacts the public twice, I would rather not have at this time. And so our proposal is to fund the shortfall with savings from the 2012 budget, from operational savings, and also from the capital side, and complete all of the project this year, including the amenities of the retention pond and the pedestrian facilities.
John?
George, I might just put a little bit of context around the budget issue. Also, when we originally budgeted this project, it was the first time that we had put together a comprehensive capital plan for the county, and so we put together a 10-year capital plan. When we started that planning process, we were working with about $400,000 that had been budgeted in the previous year for capital improvements, and so we did a lot of work to reorganize our financial structure and such in order to be able to increase our spending on capital improvements. And so when it came to the planning for this particular project, we actually budgeted for a reduced scope from the planning process that GR was speaking of, and that really just included our estimates for the road repairs as well as the drainage improvements. We originally did not budget for the pedestrian improvements and certainly not for the additional water quality amenities that the board had requested and that we've since added to the project. And so we did that because our projections at that time showed we may not have funding to do much more, and we had some clear maintenance issues with the road quality and drainage that needed to be addressed in the AABC. Where we find ourselves today is a little bit different than where we thought we would be when we developed that original capital plan. And basically that is, as Brian said, we find ourselves with additional fund balance this year, both because of savings on the operations side as well as savings on the capital side, which we believe are adequate to cover the full scope of this project. And so had we had the right crystal ball, I think, and projected revenues where they're at now, we would have proposed the full scope that we had discussed with the community in our budget when we made that original capital plan. Happily, we find ourselves in that position now, and so we wanted to have the discussion with the board about whether the board would support doing the full scope of the project now, or whether we needed to phase and do a reduced scope as we had originally planned.
I have a question, Brian, and I see there's some folks here representing the Aspen Airport Business Center. Can you review the sidewalk plan for us? And I asked this probably way back in 2008. One of my concerns was regarding the maintenance of those because I sort of see the hands going, who's responsible? Well, this person's responsible, and so no one has taken responsibility over the last 10 years in terms of maintaining the current sidewalks out there, certainly in the wintertime in terms of plowing. So for folks who are utilizing RAPTA and now with the BRT coming online, one of my concerns I've always expressed was, well, who actually maintains going from the RAPTA stop, just getting down to the AABC for those people who have to go to work or doing some errands? And is it RAPTA's responsibilities? Is it the counties, or is it the airport business centers? And then once you're down there, that one sidewalk that is adjacent right across from the ski company, that was never, at least when I worked out there for many, many years, that was never plowed or maintained. So what ended up happening was everyone actually walked on the road. So I'd like you to address that and perhaps just give a quick review in terms of where the pedestrian sidewalks would go, but more importantly, who's actually going to maintain it. So if the object is to get people, pedestrians off the road and out of harm's way, you've got to have those sidewalks accessible.
Yeah, I agree. And there's really three areas of pedestrian way that I'd like to discuss. But this is new for the county. We are a rural county, and we typically don't take care of urban infrastructure like sidewalks. So this will be a shift for us, and that's what we're up against right now. In fact, I don't think we have any areas where we have this kind of stormwater drainage system in the county. It's the first really stormwater drainage system that Pickens County's installed. So we're kind of bumping up against new territory. But the three areas of concern is with the RAPTA bus stop, or the new BRT station, a lot of that's going to be snow melted. So we have snow melt design in and around that station and for the pedestrian crossing of Highway 82. So that's good. The other good thing about this pedestrian design is a lot of it's at grade. So we'll be able to take care of that easily with our rural snow plowing equipment. and that'll just be done as a matter of course for snow plowing. The area that is of concern is really two sidewalk areas, and what are both their lengths?
I'm not sure what the lengths
Yeah,
are, but
where are they?
we're talking about what you discussed along the frontage road of the 100 road, which the Road and Bridge team has taken over doing maintenance on. It is, however, low priority for them. They try to keep up with the storm. When they come back with the pickup trucks and the skid steers and those types of smaller pieces of equipment, then they'll get up on the sidewalk and clear the sidewalk. The other areas of sidewalk that are not at grade for this project are along Baltic Avenue. So one piece would be in front of Roxy's and then continuing towards the back of the ABC where there is some existing sidewalk now. And then in front of the row houses going towards the back of the ABC, also along the 500 or Baltic Avenue. And so, as Brian said, it's going to be new territory for our maintenance staff, but and at this time it's kind of aligned with their lower priorities as far as the snow removal process.
So, in terms of a new sidewalk, it would just be the only new sidewalk that's being proposed in this would be going north-south along Baltic and then connecting to the 400 road, is that what you
Yeah,
said?
they're essentially for the grade separated sidewalk, we're only talking about 2 blocks of additional sidewalk.
And how much did that add onto the overall capital project, the 2 blocks?
Well, we have, I guess I don't want to mix how we're talking about the maintenance operation versus the costs of the project.
Yeah.
Because the cost of the project, we also have to rebuild majority of the sidewalk that's along the 100 road because a lot of the curb and gutter there is failing and some of the sidewalk needs to be rebuilt.
Oh, okay, all right, thank you. Rachel?
You know, I think it's appropriate with this transition to try to take a look at what other more urban areas do for sidewalk maintenance. And, you know, in the city, you have an obligation to, as a property owner, to clear the sidewalk in front of you. And I don't know if that would be something that would require a county ordinance, but I think we should look at it in the long term, because I do not think that folks will be satisfied with the low maintenance priority schedule of this. And what happens is if you've really had a lot of people walking and tramping down the snow, it becomes such an ice thing that it's very hard to remove then later, a day or two later. And, you know, there are, I think, some corridors that the city does maintain that they've considered more as commuter trails, I think particularly like the Rio Grande, but others are not, you know. And so I think we really need to look at that sort of scheme, because the Airport Business Center has become a transition zone into a residential area. A lot of pedestrian and foot traffic there, as is appropriate for a village and pedestrian type of design. We've been approving new changes to even enhance that further with the size of the Roxy grocery store expanding. And I am very supportive of moving forward with the capital cost of installing this, but I do think that it is a benefit to the commercial businesses and the residents out there, and we should look at how more urbanized areas cost share the maintenance and things like that going forward. So that's my philosophy on it.
Other questions? Rob?
Just a comment. I mean, I agree with what's being said, but it's not really the topic of this memo, is it? I mean, the topic of this memo is the overrun in budget for the capital outlay of this project, not the maintenance upkeep. And I agree we need to talk about that down the road, the ordinance of potentially having landowners take place. I kept on going back saying, where is all the sidewalk stuff in this memo? Did I not read a couple of pages?
No, for me, it's just I don't want to approve any sort of capital where we haven't budgeted appropriately for.
No, I agree, but we've
maintenance.
already had the discussion, and it's already in the budget. It's the fact that this is a budget overrun because the costs are higher of construction now, and we moved the scope having to do with the retention pond. Those are the two issues that are on hand for this agenda item, and you know, the other stuff has already been talked about to some extent, and will be talked about more in the future, but it's not really what we're talking about here. The only comment that I had with this, and it's kind of unfortunate that construction costs are going up, is, and again, this really isn't the topic of the memo either, but what we need to have come back to us at some point is that 10-year plan and a readjustment of all those figures. I mean, we've seen it on our two major big projects already, and you know, that plan means nothing at this point in my, not nothing, but it's probably grossly understated to some extent based on what we're seeing from our bids coming back at this point. I'm in favor of moving forward with this. I'm assuming that we're going to see a supplemental budget approach. I think this is the way you've got it funded. Fortunately, we are finding savings in our general fund and other places. It's unfortunate that these are going to cost what they're going to cost, but they're going to cost a lot more to do them down the road even further. And this is what I was arguing about 2 years ago when we first put together that 10-year capital plan, which is now is the time to spend the money that we've got in these balances, and let's try to move as much as forward as possible instead of saying, well, we're going to pay for this like we did with the, I forget what the other project was, one of the other projects. We said we're going to pay for this by putting something further down the road. Well, it's going to turn out that that's not going to be paying for it. What's going to pay for it is doing both of them now and not paying 20% more trying to do a project 2 years from now because construction costs go up. Unfortunately, the economy is going in that direction, and it's going to help us on some things and hurt us in others. So I'd like to see the capital plan go forward, but in terms of the discussion for this, I'm in favor of moving forward.
And I think that the discussion regarding the sidewalks and the detention ponds is integral in terms of the request that's coming before us, because we would have the option to perhaps look at either phasing or deleting one or two of those options. So my question and my concern is, if we're going to do these add-ons, whether it be the sidewalks, who and how will they be maintained? Because if that's going to be an issue, then I would want to revisit that, as well as the detention pond, in terms of is there ability to phase that in, and because that's a cost overrun as well. So that's why I think it's an integral part of this agenda item. John, are you going to add something to
If you don't mind, I just wanted to be clear for the board and for the public that the original scope we budgeted was just the drainage and the road repair, so it wasn't the pedestrian improvements or the water quality, the detention pond. And so, Rob, I agree, we need to go back because we are seeing construction costs go up faster, I think, than we had anticipated when we built the capital plan. I don't want the fact that we budgeted a much more narrow scope to take away from, you know, the fact we probably are pretty solid in most of our other projects. We're going to need to make some incremental adjustments and bring those back to you. So I just want to be clear that we budgeted a smaller scope when we initially did this.
exactly? Steve?
I had a discussion with two members of the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board about possibly funding the retention pond part of the project with their funds. And I was wondering if you have that cost broken out, what it would actually cost to build the pond, assuming the water is being delivered to the pond as part of the rest of the project, but then the retention pond and settling pond is kind of the scope of the Healthy Rivers and Streams mandate.
Why don't you give the amount and I'll jump in on the Healthy Rivers and Streams portion.
Well, when we broke down the project costs based on the different appurtenances, we came up with right around $250,000 for the detention pond. That includes all of the earthwork and the concrete structures and how it regulates the flow and all of those features.
Okay.
Is that also the oil remover?
We moved away from doing any of the mechanical separation because it added a lot more maintenance, and it also took up real estate that we didn't necessarily have to work with. However, with the detention pond that's designed, just one quick feature of it is basically it takes the peak runoff and it lets it disperses it over about 40 hours, and so that allows any of the suspended solids or any of those types of pollutants to fall out before the water gets into the waterways.
Yeah, these board members were concerned, was going to bust their whole budget if they paid for the whole project.
Well,
The
and-
retention pond. They did put money into the City of Aspen project there by the Rio Grande Park. They made a nominal contribution to that, the whole cost of that project, but
Where we stand with that is we did submit a request for $100,000, so a share of the settling pond to the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board. That is one of the larger, if not largest, grant requests I guess they have received. And so there are a couple things happening to my understanding. One, this week the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board is going to be meeting to talk more about their budget priorities and how they want to allocate their funds among grant programs versus water quantity, water quality kinds of issues. And then reconsider our request within that context. They had also requested that we bring actual numbers back. So last time we were in front of the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board, we didn't have the bid for the project, so we didn't have the answer that GR just gave you. For the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board, we had our budget estimate. And so now we've got that actual bid, and we can actually talk about what the actual costs and such are for the project, which is additional information that they wanted to see. We had anticipated funding from Healthy Rivers and Streams when we put this together. We'll continue to pursue that. Whether that request would be honored at the $100,000 level or some other level, or at least recommended to you, I don't know. But we'll definitely continue with those discussions. Ultimately, the appropriation authority is this board's to choose what to do with those funds and how to appropriate them. But certainly, I think, that's by the recommendation of the Healthy Rivers and Streams Board, and by and large, this board has honored that those recommendations.
Okay, this is a work session. We normally don't take public comments, but if we're talking about this particular project, I saw John McBride's hand up, so I'll entertain some brief comments, but we're not going to have a dialogue or an open session here.
Well, thanks, George. I happen to think that there's a mistake being made with a sidewalk on Baltic, because coming from the Rohausen North 40 to get around, let's say, to Roxy, requires 6 road crossings. It also requires taking down planter boxes and a number of trees. And that is the area that is the most automotive intensive, with the gas station, the car wash, what will be the back door of Roxy's liquor store. A much simpler and I think cheaper possibility would be to consider the pedestrian way on top of the 20-foot utility easement between Ski Company and Obermeyer, because it leads directly to the tunnel. And it would take people out of that auto-intensive area. So I wish you'd look into and consider that.
Good, thank you, John. I'd almost like to see, we don't have a map of this, or so we really can understand John's comments, the alternative with where that easement is. You're very familiar with it. Some of us are not as familiar. I think it'd be handy to see a map and to look at some of these alternatives if we have the time to do that, which I think we probably do.
I've talked, oh, sorry, Jim.
And if that's not enough, it may be worth a site visit out there, just to walk out there and really try to understand what actually has to happen to accommodate this sidewalk. So I would throw that out to the board as well.
What are my question would be, what would the timing constraints of that be? I mean, we've got a pretty short window here to get back to these bid requests and start getting in the ground.
We have a contractor that's interested in starting work in the month of May. So, yeah.
So, I mean, but order changes to that have to happen yesterday then, it would seem.
We're pretty tight.
I mean, so other than a site visit this afternoon, I mean, I agree with the idea, but I'm just trying to put it to a calendar.
You know, George, my only concern with that is we have been in front of the board with a proposed design. That's when the water retention pond was added. We had approval from the board, given the addition of scope to move forward with bidding out the project. And we understood at that time that the bids were probably going to come in over, given the added scope that we had in. And so we've kind of planned our project schedule to not necessarily revisiting or redesigning the project in that respect. And so I think if we want to take that evaluation process, we'll probably more be looking at pushing the project back a year at this point, rather than redesigning it. So
When you say the project, John, you mean the project just specifically the sidewalk along Baltic?
no, I mean, because I believe there's drainage amenities that go under that. Is that correct? So it plays in with the drainage and the whole project design right now.
And George,
Yeah, Brian.
I've talked to John about his idea, and I don't think that this project doesn't preclude that idea. I think it's a good one, and that is a pedestrian way that we could look at in the future, and also include the sidewalks. The sidewalks, as they've been placed, is based on a lot of public input that GR's had over the last 5 years. And so again, there's an expectation that these would be placed in the locations the project would place them. John's idea of that pedestrian throughway on that utility easement, we can do that in the future. There would need to be some legal documentation for us to use that as a pedestrian way in addition to a utility easement. So I think we could do both.
So right now, I'll get to you, Rachel. Right now, people who are walking north-south along Baltic, they're basically walking on the road.
Pretty much,
Yeah,
yes.
so even though the sidewalk may pose some movement of planters or trees or crossings, it still will be an alternative than being on the road itself.
Correct.
Rachel?
Yeah, I think Brian has just said a lot of what I was thinking, is that I'd love to see it with redundant pathways, because if you're just in the North 40 and going to Roxy's, you're not going to circle all the way around and come around, so there's a lot of different types of pedestrian movements. And so I could really see having both, but the utility easement is going to take a lot of very careful planning, because you don't know their maintenance schedule or when they're planning on repairs or replacement, and you want to make sure you haven't put anything down until after they've done theirs. And if it may make sense to be a soft service, but I'm really not familiar enough with the topography to know, would that be mucky and flood certain times of the years, and would it have to have a drainage component even if it was a soft surface? And then you have to make sure you're not draining and affecting the neighboring properties and their foundations on either side. So it's probably a much larger undertaking to add it, but I could see that being of great value overall and in time. So I would support moving, keeping that on the radar and taking a real look at that. But I also, back to the other components of the plan, would like to see if we're able to design or have that retention pond in such a way that if there's a future desire to add more of the mechanical separator, we're not going to have to redo the concrete foundations, we're not going to have to redo things. I understand time is tight, or space is tight, but it may be both that there's advancements in the type of separator equipment, but given the whole, growing interest, as there should be, in, water quality and health, and let alone EPA mandates coming down for that, I don't know if by collecting it all, do we start to become a source point instead of a non-source point? Or, those definitions tend to change a little bit, and then also the standards for both of those categories are continually improving. And so while we may get a lot of the, suspended solids to drop out during a better settling period, just familiarity living nearby the Rio Grande ponds doesn't mean they don't get awful yucky at times, and that there's not a lot of floating oil or other materials that really don't drop out no matter what. So I can understand while we don't have it now, we may want to add it later. And, I said this at our meeting with the Healthy Rivers and Stream Board a while ago. I can understand their hesitation that, of saying, well, shouldn't this be a cost of doing your road and street and stormwater drainage as opposed to coming out of our fund, and are we always going to be the adjunct to county projects, and we don't budget appropriately for, cost of road and bridge projects should continue, considering its impacts on water quality, as opposed to always kind of coming back to them for it. I mean, I can see some level of participation, but it just becomes dangerous that it would become a funding source for road, all the ditch work everywhere, and throughout all the county roads, instead of actually being channeled towards some of the other original ballot language improvements. So it's a dangerous, slippery slope. I can see some participation, but you just wouldn't want to see, say, for example, the county not doing the energy efficiency improvements it should do in its buildings on its own budget, saying, well, if we get a core grant, we'll make them energy efficient, but if we don't get a core grant, we won't. And I don't think that should be our planning criteria for these things. So, I'm supportive of moving it forward. I do think Rob makes a good point about kind of reviewing our other projects in light of inflation. Fully acknowledge that this was a increase of scope as opposed to just overruns from the original scope. And, wanted to kind of, for myself, I realize our later request in the packet is for human service position, but that's kind of a net zero to the budget. But we have increased our staffing capacity with the attorney's office, and so just to really kind of continue to see an updated general fund plan going forward is important.
Brian, we talked about, it's been a while, but when we looked at the overall movement around the AABC with vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists, we were starting to work on sort of a master plan, and that's still sort of an ongoing in terms of how that all will flow together, certainly with bicyclists. And part of that discussion, I thought, when we looked at the sidewalks, we were talking about changing the edge of the curb of that sidewalk so it would make it easier for bicyclists to get on and off. What's happening with all that?
Well, we integrated all of those into the design. What we felt was we have an existing sidewalk on the 100 road that's grade separated. It's behind the curb, and that's worked. We also feel that with how much traffic there is on Baltic Avenue or the 500 road, that was also appropriate there in separating the pedestrians from the automobiles. On the 300 road, where we have existing pedestrians walking down the road, what we did is we widened the road template, and we'll stripe that as a pedestrian and bikeway. And that's the same as the 200 road from essentially the end of the ABC to Aspen Trail down to Pasco Lane and the Deer Hill building on the 200 road and the ski.com building. That's all at grade as well.
Okay, thanks. Steve, you had a hand up?
Yeah, two areas of concern. In terms of the mechanical separator on the Aspen's Rio Grande project, that separator they have is essential for the process to work because it actually separates oil out that it might very likely be in water coming off of the streets. And the way it's designed, it's this baffle and the oil floats up to the top, but then it stops there and they have to remove it periodically, but it doesn't go down to the river at all.
Yeah.
And so that's really an essential part of doing something that's keeping that from going into the river. If we just put it in the retention pond, the oil is going to be floating on top and it's going to go into the Roaring Fork River. So I think I would do the mechanical separator before the retention pond, possibly, if you could only build one or the other, because there's some sediment would get into the river, but the oil would be captured. Then my other question is, does this in any fashion address the problems of the residents on 400 Road with the dead end street? Does that play into this whole project at all?
It's played into a lot of the time spent during the planning process and also in our site visits out there with the public. We have an opportunity to address some of the concerns as far as pedestrian amenity past the gate on the 400 Road. Staff in 2010 did go through an entire process just around that gate on the 400 Road, and that will be remaining based on that process and other feedback that we've gotten from the community. So yeah, it does go a significant way to addressing some of those issues.
So the two decision points we have today is, do we still support the water quality amenity aspect of this project? And there's different aspects of it. Or
Well, the one question we got down to, it was $250,000 for just the pond. What was the additional cost for the mechanical separator component?
We never priced out. Based on the way that we put together the planning and the design of the project, we went solely with the ponds. In that the arrays of the mechanical separators that we needed and everything else would have, if my memory serves, I think they were, between $70,000 and $100,000 a piece, and we needed two separate arrays of them to handle the amount of water that comes off the ABC.
If I could make a suggestion for the board, what may make more, because we know we've got sediment load there, and so we know that the pond makes sense, but to my knowledge, we haven't actually done any baseline or water quality studies, and what may make sense is to construct the infrastructure for the sediment loading that you can just see from the erosion on the hillside, and then do some, and maybe that's a place where Healthy Rivers and Streams could cooperate. We could do some of the water quality studies and then bring back, if the water quality studies indicate that we should be looking at the mechanical separators. But my concern at adding on the scope, I'm not sure we've done that baseline work yet, and we should probably do that before we build all of this additional infrastructure. That would be my recommendation. And we could certainly carry forward doing that kind of baseline after we get the pond built.
Rachel?
I would agree with that approach. I would want to particularly make sure that we're using past data that has been collected already, through the watershed plan, and we don't, reinvent the wheel there, because I'm not sure to what level that specific zone has been tested or not. But I think, make sure we do utilize resources available. And then again, making sure the design is such that if we have to retrofit, we don't have to, redo the foundations too much. But I would agree with Steve. I think it's important. I wouldn't put one over the other, to have the sediment, and things like that can be quite an issue on its own. But if we can have this able to be phased or able to be upgraded, should we find the resources to do so, or the mandatory compulsion to do so, whichever. I'd rather do it up front rather than be forced into it. But I do agree with phasing, and so I'm okay with the retention pond, and I think that that's an important first step in moving this forward. There's no retention now. It's just straight in. So.
And part of that retention pond, then the second part of the question is, then do we support utilizing the fund balance savings to complete the project, which includes the retention pond and the sidewalks?
For me, it's yes. You know, there's no use doing it if we're not doing it right, and these are components to make it right. If we had more budget, there might even be more pedestrian amenity, but it's not quite bare bones, but it's not elaborate by any means.
Members of the board? Okay, thank you, and I hope that we'll continue to working with representatives at ABC as we continue with the pedestrian and bike plan and look at some of these alternatives in terms of utilizing that utility easement. I think it's a great idea as well.
Okay, we can do that.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
We're running a few minutes ahead, George. I don't know if you want to take a break or if you want to
Oh, what can we knock off simple
looking at
future agendas? We actually have a couple hours ahead of us. Let's take a break. Joshua, let's go and take a 15-minute break.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, next on the agenda is the Castle Creek guardrail proposal, and Brian Pettit's going to introduce this.
Great, thank you. I'm Brian Pettit, I'm the Director of Public Works. I'm here with G.R. Fielding, County Engineer, Tom Newland, and Glenn Horn, and Tom and Glenn represent the citizens of Castle Creek. And about 2 years ago, Tom and Glenn came to the county and proposed to install a large amount of guardrail on Castle Creek Road. Just over 5 miles of guardrail. And at that time, we met as staff and decided that there was really too much guardrail in this area, and we really need to go through a public process to install guardrail at all along a county road that's going to change the character of the area. So Tom and Glenn organized a meeting of the people of Castle Creek. Subsequent to that, we met with the Board of County Commissioners once, and then we had a follow-up site visit in the fall with the board where we introduced different areas where the guardrail was going to be installed. And at each step of the way, the guardrail amount was reduced substantially to the point we are today where we're at 2,100 feet. We recently met again with Commissioner Child to show Steve the areas as well, and determined that the areas that we're really looking at guardrail right now, it's needed. These are areas that are dangerous, and I think 2,100 feet is a reasonable amount of guardrail for this area that's fairly precipitous, and we've had trouble with cars going off as well. So Tom's really going to go over the areas specifically, and so that we can make sure that the board's comfortable with the guardrail proposal, as well as staff. And at this point, staff is recommending to allow the citizens of Castle Creek to install the guardrail. This would be done under a right-of-way work permit, where county staff has control over the project from an authority standpoint. Through that permit, we can dictate when the work's going to be done, the type of traffic control, and the type of guardrail that would be installed. At that time, we do have guardrail up in that area that is damaged. We would also fix existing guardrail through that contractor through a change order. So with that, I'd like to turn over to
Hold on
Tom.
for a second, Brian.
Yeah, just a small nuanced correction. You keep saying the citizens of Castle Creek, and this is the nonprofit Citizens for Castle Creek.
Sorry.
So Tom is not representing all the citizens of Castle Creek.
Yes.
So I want to be clear on that. And then secondly, just so it is up front in the presentation or in our following questions, I note that the county would be then inheriting the long-term maintenance costs of these areas. And I really, especially given our last discussion on capital projects and your budget, need to get some idea what we anticipate that to be, because it seems to me that there should be either some sort of trust fund or escrow account or some sort of balance put forward to be able to offset that increased maintenance cost. And it might not be all of it, but I don't want to start with a deficit going forward in our budgets. And my example would be easily looking up at Independence Pass. It's been great, the different guardrail that was originally installed, but between the spring plowing and cars hitting it, it's a lot of upkeep, and it can look pretty ugly when it's just re-tacked up and it's been very much damaged by cars bumping into it and things. So that's going to be my big question when we get through the presentation about placements.
And then, Brian, the difference between us managing the project vis-a-vis the right-of-way and the nonprofit organization actually hiring the contractor and sending out their own RFPs. I mean, there's a distinction there. If you could just clarify that.
Yeah, really, this is being fully funded by the nonprofit group, and I apologize for referring to the citizens of Castle Creek because it's not. Because it's being paid by a private entity, we would look to them to do that bidding process. There's no public funds involved, but we would control the project from an authority standpoint through a right-of-way work permit. And again, we would dictate when the work would take place, where it would take place, the type of traffic control that would be used, and control it through authority of the permit.
Okay, so in essence, we really have full control of the project.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Brian? Okay, Tom?
Okay, yeah, I'll just go real quick. I don't want to bore you with what I've already told you in the memorandum, but on page 3 of my memorandum, I have a little chart that shows the length of, that we were proposing before your site trip in October, and then how we've revised it afterwards. And we did this revision with the assistance of our traffic engineer, Skip Hudson, and he basically kind of explained, he basically said that areas that have more need for guardrail are kind of these outside curves that we saw out there that have either no shoulder or pull-offs and have really steep drops of greater than 50 feet. That was kind of what we looked at. And then also inside curves that don't have a shoulder but also has this steep drop-off of 50 feet or more. And that's kind of how we weeded it down, of course, based on your input too when you were out there. It was really pretty much the same as the direction you gave us. So I'm going to start at the top of the road here. We had one originally, as you recall, at the Upper Castle Creek Bridge. I'm not showing that on these photos because we have removed that from the plan. The first one is right at the top, just you can see right over here at Little Annie's Road, just down below there, there's a section of existing guardrail. And the first section here is an extension of that existing guardrail for about 100 feet, where there's some pretty serious drop-offs, and we just felt that extending it 100 feet would be good.
So, Tom, before you move on, so just to clarify, everything heading south or up valley from Little Annie's, there's not going to be any additional guardrails?
Right.
No guardrail work?
No
So it's
guardrail.
all from Little Annie's heading down valley?
Yep.
Okay. Good.
Exactly. Yeah, I guess maybe to summarize for you, and Glenn did this good when we were meeting about a half hour ago, it's basically we've got these areas below Little Annie's down to right before Conundrum Creek Road on the south side of the road. And then we have some areas right after, this is going down, say you're going down valley towards the music campus. Then we have some areas right past the first bridge, Midnight Mine Road, and then at the music school. And then the last one is an extension of the guardrail down next to the Merle's housing. And that's pretty much where we are right now. And I can show you those real quick on here. So there's that first section. The next sections are as you're starting to go past the existing guardrail, which is right up in this area here. There's a couple of sections right here. Now this one, if you recall, was pretty long. It went about 800 feet and wrapped around that whole steep curve. And what we found upon further inspection with our engineer is this little horseshoe curve here and then an area right up above where there's a pull-off in between made the most sense for guardrail in that area. And really we reduced that from about 750 feet down to about 470 feet. So we cut that pretty significantly based on your direction.
This says 650, 370.
Yeah, 370. Oh yeah, 650 to 370, yes, sorry about that. The next one, the 240-foot one, is right here. And that one stayed the same. That's a short area that has a steep drop-off down. And we thought that one was pretty good just the way it is. So that was left at 240 feet. The next one down here at this curve, as you recall, was actually in two sections, one up here and then one down below. We combined those two sections and reduced them pretty significantly so that we have just the area around the curve from pretty much the apex of the curve on either side to cover that area down next to the Highland Ranch. Let's see, where am I here? Oh yeah, okay, so now here's the first Castle Creek Bridge right here. So we originally had a guardrail going all the way up to steep grade above the beaver ponds, and it was like 750 feet, I believe. And we've eliminated all of it except for this first sharp curve as you start heading down that grade towards the bridge. That one was pretty open and a pretty steep drop, more than 50 feet. And we thought that would be a good way to start on that area and see how it goes in the future. But that was the area that definitely needed it of that whole stretch that we originally had. Then likewise here we had a long stretch that went above Midnight Mine Road around this curve. We've reduced that down to a small 200-foot section, I believe, Right, and it's in a straightaway, but oddly enough, there's two known cars that have gone off there. One in last October, or last spring, or what?
It was like a few days after your site
Yeah.
visit, right there, last October.
And they
It
went
was
up-
a super dangerous spot.
Yeah, they went all the way down it, and it's just a little gap in the break of the woods, and a real steep ravine that comes, there's no shoulder at all, and you go right down to some residents down below. So we felt reducing this long section down to this 200 feet part made sense. And we've got the next one. And now we're working our way down to the music school campus, which is right over here. And then we have this one curved section here where a lot of people have gone off, more than, I think, 3 or 4 people that we know of, right below Hall Road, where we pretty much retained that amount of guardrail around that curve. And then right above the entrance road to the music school, there's a shallow curve here that, although there's not totally 50-foot drop there, because of that access road below there, the engineer and us, we felt that it was good to have that there to protect people on the lower road from possible cars coming down on them, especially now with the, new improvements to the music school campus. It's a lot more activity. So we did that one. I believe that one, that was reduced from 450 feet down to 300. So we reduced that as much as we could to still make it effective. And then the last section is down here, the extension of the existing guardrail around this curve to protect the more old housing a little bit more. And that was 250 feet, and we reduced it to 100 feet. So we did more than a 50% reduction based on your guidance, and we try to keep them in shorter sections like you told us to at the site visit.
Questions for Tom? Rachel?
Yeah, what has the design of the guardrails themselves been? Are we at the steel cable and mallards in between, or more that longer steel?
Yeah, in discussions with Brian and GR, we felt that keeping the Core-10, do you call it? The Core-10 rusted guardrail that you see out there now is the best approach from basically from a consistency standpoint, system-wide, and also just easier to maintain, And one of the things, I'll get to your question in that in a minute as far as maintenance goes, but we just felt that was a better way to do it, and staff concurred with us. Even though those wire ones work, you see them all over. In fact, a great place is over the Blue Mesa Dam. They have them on either side. I don't know if it makes me feel secure or not, but they are used, and Wyoming uses them as well on their roads. But we felt consistency with the system and a known kind of attribute, if you will, would be the best way to go. And as far as maintenance goes, we're willing to purchase additional guardrail for placement in the future when guardrail becomes damaged. And in fact, just give it to the county, and if they use it up here on Castle Creek Road or in the Frying Pan or Woody Creek or whatever, that's fine. But we would try to give like another 15 or 20% of guardrail in storage for use for repair.
I'm not so sure we'd have the storage. It might be better to store the money for when we need to buy it than to try and store it on site.
We could do that too. But, prices increase and
Well, no, I know what you're saying.
get a bigger bang for your buck if we buy it for you. But yeah, we can do it either way.
Other questions for Tom?
So it'd be 2 layers?
No, just
a single.
one layer of Core-10, which is kind of curved, like, kind of looks like 2 layers actually, because there's 2 parts that stick out with a concave one in the middle. And we would use metal posts instead of wood posts, primarily because of the steep drop-offs. The metal post can anchor really well on that steep grade.
So it's interesting because, as you noted, Glenn, that straightaway section received, right after we visited, some accidents. And again, it comes back to our initial conversation in terms of people going beyond the speed limits or the road conditions, weather conditions. So curves perhaps are a natural way to monitor speed, but as soon as you get to a straightaway, someone typically will sort of gun it and then without realizing if there's some black ice or something, find themselves in trouble. So it still doesn't alleviate the responsibility for the drivers to be able to drive as the weather dictates, but it seems like this plan, this revised plan now has really identified some of those just key areas without being very obtrusive in terms of changing the landscape of Castle Creek.
And they are in shorter sections too, which help really break down on the visual impact. Instead of an 800-foot section you're going by, it's 100, 200, 300 feet, goes by much quickly, much more faster.
As I said earlier, for some reason we're getting some great attendance today, which is always good to see. Typically in a work session we don't take public comments, but there are a few people here and we have a few minutes, so if someone would like to make a public comment, I will entertain that. It has to be very short. We're not going to have any discussion or any debate, but if you just identify yourself, that will be fine.
I'm Tom Kurt, and I'm a property owner up in the Castle Creek Valley since 1976. And I've been born in Wichita, Kansas, like Bill Koch, and I've ridden up and down that road thousands of times without any accidents. My concern is for certain things in the guardrails. Number one, wild game traveling across the road and getting impinged upon the guardrails, because there are a lot of elk up there, bikers, and that being a hazard for bikers. And number three, snow maintenance. So if those have been looked into thoroughly and are solved, that will solve a lot of the issues.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Joe Wells, I'm also a resident of Castle Creek. I'm encouraged that we're now focusing on where the real problem areas are, and we're no longer proposing guardrail right alongside the stream that would block the stream. I would like to see the guardrails placed as far out in the right-of-way as possible to leave as much room for bikers to escape and other critters. You know, we have people jogging up Castle Creek Road. We have I'm sure you know, a very large number of bikers now. It's probably the most popular spot for bikers these days. So to the extent that we can give everybody as much room as possible, that would be great.
Okay, anybody else? Yes?
John Wilcox, Ashcroft, ski touring, also a property owner. I think it's great. You guys done a lot of work, and I knew in the end you'd come up with a solution that would work for everybody. I think we have children, and I think anything we can do to make that road a little safer, taking the concerns about bikers and joggers is great. And I think I ran off once in 26 years. It's not a spot where you have a guardrail, so there's still going to be some accidents, and I don't think it's necessarily speeding that causes them. There's a lot of conditional changes up there. So I applaud what you're doing, and we are also one of the citizens that support this group, and we know our customers are going to appreciate it too.
Good, thank you. Board, any other questions or comments? Rachel, then Steve?
Yeah, what will the ends of the guardrail sections look like? Will they be curved around? Will there be a little reflector on those? Things like that?
Yeah, actually, when we were up at the site visit with Steve, Brian gave us some good input about the sections. In fact, what we're looking at in most cases is trying to veer the guardrail off and further away from the driving surface and oncoming traffic. And this is for a couple of reasons, for snow plowing, but also just to kind of present the guardrail and make sure somebody doesn't run into them head on. And there's also end pieces that go on these guardrails. In fact, the end pieces cost more than the guardrail itself. And they are kind of crash, they accept crashes so that the impact isn't that bad.
Yeah, but it's not the big orange barrels that accept the crash or anything
And
like that.
veering them away from that helps to reduce that visual impact as well.
Okay. Two last questions, and one is more of a footnote, but when we manage the projects through our use permit in the right-of-way, We will also be paying careful attention to the revegetation work that goes forward, so the disturbed soils don't become an opportunity for thistle or other invasive weeds, and you'll have a chance to look at a mix, and I think we should have it that if it doesn't take the first year fully, that will be reseeded again the following year. You never can tell with rain and things like that as to how well a seed mix will take or be washed away or whatever. And it might be an opportunity to really get a little wildflower in that mix as well, so it can become really very visually nice. You think about what they were able to do in the canyon area on some of the re-veg there with the Indian paintbrush and other species. So I think that'd be great. The last is, Brian, do you feel there's going to be increased erosion from where the snowplow deposition, if it is not depositing where the guardrails are now? Are we going to end up with more hot spots where more snow has to melt or be pushed off the side in other places?
Yeah, I guess a little bit. There's not a lot of disturbance associated with guardrail installation. It's really a matter of them pounding posts into the ground. But in the case where there was disturbances, we'd make sure there was revegetation associated with that. With regard to snow plowing, it's a matter of getting the snow over the guardrail. There is some shading that would occur because you got a guardrail right next to the road, so it provides a little additional shading for the driving surface. But typically, we can get the snow off the road where it melts, going away anyway. So did that answer your question?
I think it did. Thank you very much.
Steve?
Questions for Brian also, and I was wondering what the effect on snow plowing is. Do you have to do different techniques or use different equipment or greater cost, or what is the effect on the snow plowing?
Not really. It's a matter of it's operations that we've got to be concerned about, so that the snowplow driver doesn't rest the snowplow right against the rail and cause damage that way. The drivers tend to use that as a guide, which they can, but they need to use it visually and not physically. And so it doesn't change snowplow operations. Like I said before, it just provides a little additional shading for the road surface, and that's the concern with guardrail. But we can either push the snow through or over the guardrail, and that doesn't cause us additional cost.
And the one thing you would not be able to do is go along and drop a wing down to wing the bank over at that point.
Absolutely not. Yeah. That's right.
So that would change your operation a little bit on those locations.
In big snow years, we may need to treat the banks differently. If we start seeing large banks along the road there, we can do that, but that would need to be done anyway, and that's a much slower operation where we're having to deal with a large bank, but we haven't had that problem in a couple of years now. So, but we wouldn't touch the guardrail. We can do it above the guardrail and take care of that additional snow.
Okay. And then, do you have any estimate on what the average annual maintenance cost would be on the guardrails?
I don't right now. It's a matter of damage. Gio, would you happen to?
We don't necessarily track our annual costs with guardrail repair. Typically, when we have some sort of capital improvement going on in an area, so in years past when we've done chip seals on McLean Flats or on Brush Creek and roads like that where we have a lot of guardrail, we had included that in the contract, and so we usually tend, unless there's a severe accident that takes out a stretch of guardrail, we'll try to clump all of those repairs into those projects.
So back to, I think Rachel's suggestion, which I like, is there a way to write into that contract that there will be some dollars set aside, or we can discuss it, or purchase of additional guardrails for future needs?
Yeah, I'm ready to do that. Like I said, we were thinking of 15 or 20% extra material, so we could have that on hand, but we could also translate that into a dollar amount or whatever based on input from the county.
Yeah, and it may be that Public Works has the ability to store that, I don't know, so it may not be a storage issue. That's something you'd have to tell, address Rachel's question or concern. The other concerns that were raised, and which we've discussed before, but just to clarify or pacify those concerns, is the guardrail will not inhibit any wildlife, nor will it inhibit any bicyclists around these areas?
Well, do you want,
Well, we did have some guardrail placed up above, proposed up above Little Annie's Road, which was in an area where historically I've seen elk kind of in that area crossing at the winters, several winters as a matter of fact. So that portion has been eliminated. And then I think the longer distances too would be much more of a barrier to elk than what we have now with the shorter spans where they could possibly actually even see the ends of it and go around it.
yeah, these aren't real tall barriers. Elk and deer would not have trouble crossing over the guardrail even if it was in their way.
Yep.
They would just literally step over the guardrail in most cases. With bicycle travel, where the bikes are along the rail, they're not going to be able to get off the road very far because in those situations, there's not a shoulder anyway. So that would not be a place they'd want to get off even if the rail wasn't there.
So in another sense, it may actually enhance the safety of the bicyclists. I mean, I ride up that road quite often, and I would worry about a car perhaps getting too close to me and pushing me off. So in those situations, it's an added protection for the bicyclists.
That's correct.
Yeah, just one thing, after watching these elk in Castle Creek for years and years, the place where they cross the most on the road is above Conundrum on those curves. And they don't go in these spots where the guardrail is proposed because it's so steep and the drop is so big right below the guardrail. So they tend to look for more level spots to cross the road right there. It's right in this area, but we're not right where the guardrail is, and it makes sense because they're looking for an easy way to go.
Okay, Rob?
In your packet, you talked about a 2-week expected project time with no road closures, but some lane closures. Can you expand on that? Do you have a time frame that you're looking at, or?
It would be for short periods during, let's say we're at one section putting in the guardrail for a day. There would be, during that day, we would have flaggers on either side, which would regulate traffic on one lane of the road while that guardrail is being placed. So that's kind of how we do it. We wouldn't do it during rush hours. We'd probably, similar to where CDOT doesn't do work during rush hours on Highway 2, we do the same thing on Castle Creek Road, do it from 9 to 3 or 4, and do it that way. But there wouldn't be a total closure. It would just be controlled to one lane.
And what are the dates we're looking at here? What time of year?
Well, I don't know. We could do it most any time. We could work with the seasons as well, during high tourist season in the summer. Wouldn't have to do it then. We could do it maybe in the fall when the traffic is much less. And of course, we'd work all that out through the right-of-way permit.
I think Steve has.
Steve, then Rachel?
We were discussing this when I was on the site visit, but I felt like this was doing the minimal amount now on the most dangerous areas, and obviously there could be other places people will go off the road in the future, and I just want to be sure we have, I don't know, does the Road and Bridge Department keep track of that, or perhaps the citizens for Castle Creek could keep track in the future after the guardrail is installed, just to note places where cars go off where there is not guardrail, and maybe there are some other areas that would be deemed dangerous in the future, or maybe we get them all now. We don't really know, but just a way to kind of monitor that in the future would be good.
Yeah, and the way it's currently done through Colorado State Patrol isn't adequate. They don't really tell you where they are. They just say, well, north of Highway 82, we had an accident. Doesn't really even tell you the road. So that's one thing we had a problem discovering when we went through this study, and we just basically relayed on word of mouth as far as people going off.
Yeah, and you nailed the corner I went off on this, so I'm glad with that.
Yeah.
Rachel?
Yeah, Brian, I'm trying to recall this, but do we have any share the road type signs on that already? I mean, I don't want to litter it with signs, but I'd like to, think that maybe we would at least have one, or, because it is really dependent, the safety on people driving appropriate to the conditions as much as anything, and acknowledging the amount of bicycle traffic.
I believe there is one sign on Castle Creek Road,
By
but
the hospital.
Yeah, we should just kind of review whether we think that placement's the most effective. It may not be until you've gotten a little further up that you start thinking about it, and so it could be fine where it is, but it'd be worth looking at it. And then secondly is what will be the communication plan with the neighbors and residents along Castle Creek once the construction's beginning, or kind of before or during?
Yeah. Well, as a part of this whole process, we developed a really good mailing list and a communication list, email list with the folks on Castle Creek Road. And I see us using that to let them know when the construction's going to begin, its duration, even updating them during the construction process so they know where we're going to be on the road, and approach it that way. I think that would be the best way to do it.
I think that'd be appropriate, and also have some sort of published phone number that people can call.
Right.
If they see project, trash left at a construction site, or, anything like that. And, it's primarily the neighbors that we need to, be able to let the Chamber of Commerce know, anyone giving people directions that are going to be going up and using that road in the summer, that, there may be delays. There are construction underway.
Good point, Rachel. Thank you.
Sort of a slightly off topic, but sharing the road. First, it'd be nice to probably have some signage up by Ashcroft, people coming down. But sharing the road, there's a perception that means that autos need to be concerned that they're bike riders. But it's just as important for bike riders to realize they are sharing the road with automobiles, and many times I'll see 3-4 abreast going up, taking a whole lane of bicyclists, feeling that they own the road, and that really is not the case. It's a sharing the road by all users.
I think there is a single file sign too on that road, if I recall
May have come
correctly.
down when the state law changed, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Anyway, that's just sort of a
just kind of
Excellent.
look at that.
Any other questions for, were you comfortable with moving this project ahead?
No comments, other than we really need to work out that kind of future maintenance issue, and I'd go towards a higher percent than a lower percent. Do we know what you're estimating the cost of this project will be?
Yeah, it's right around $100,000
Okay.
with the new length. And we can dig a little bit maybe on the internet to see if there's any boilerplate costs for guardrail maintenance that other communities can share with us, and make the Aspen adjustment and maybe go that way.
that's great.
And I think I'd just like to thank you and the group that you're representing for working with us and taking the time in the process to get something that would be more balanced with the preservation of the view planes and the citizens' concerns there. At the end of the day, you can't make society safe from itself at all points and at all levels, and we are a rural mountainous community, and keeping that character intact while providing a measure of public safety is a real balancing act.
Yeah, well, I want to thank the commissioners too for your willingness to listen to the proposal and stick with it with us. We appreciate it.
Okay, looks like we're good to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank everyone for attending. Now we're really ahead of ourselves.
Which is great.
Maybe we can go into future agendas, and it does look like most of our MOIs are going to require other staff and such, so why don't we work through what we can, and maybe you'll get another break. So, future agendas.
Excuse me, you guys, we're still in the meeting, so if you carry your conversation outside, that would be great.
Thanks, George. On future agendas, just have a few items to call your attention to. First, on May 7th, we obviously have some breaks in that agenda, so we'll probably actually be starting at 11 unless we have another work session item that comes up this week. The executive session that's scheduled towards the end of the day is actually going to be in place of the executive session that's currently scheduled for May 14th on Title 10 issues with the airport. The reason we're scheduling it at the end of the day is to accommodate travel schedules for some individuals we need in that discussion. So that may get moved up to 3. We're still waiting to see when we can expect everyone to get in, particularly given the good spring weather we've been having so far. So we'll condense that.
One comment on that. You know, I don't know that I want to eliminate the Tuesday, May 14th executive session at this time. It may, I mean, I understand moving the topic, but we may need that just for update on other.
Right, I wasn't going to
Okay.
eliminate it.
Okay.
We still need to work with John Ely, but that was one item we knew we wanted to move up and
Okay.
have an earlier discussion.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just how you said we're going to condense it down, so I thought,
Oh, I'm sorry, I meant on
that.
May 7th.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
May 14th, we do have the follow-up with Anna Poole, and this is a follow-up to our retreat discussion. And I wanted to propose that maybe we do that at an off-site location. That is when we're doing some of our coaching work and such that we've been doing during our retreat, and the board had asked for some more discussion along those lines. I'm not sure that that's really conducive to this environment here, so if you would be supportive, I'll look for an off-site location.
There would just be just the commissioners, yourself, and Anna.
Anna,
There won't be a
yeah.
lot of staff. I don't know. I think we could round table this out.
Well, I've just had a question about whether it's a continuation of the retreat or is it a real work session item? And as a continuation of the receipt, I'm not envisioning that it's a grassroots TV production type of session. So, you know, I don't know if we could find someplace that's nearby that's pleasant and a little, you know, thinking out of the box instead of our usual chambers. That's good with me, but.
We could even look at like the fire station or library, just somewhere that gets you in a little bit different space. So we'll go ahead and look for that.
Because we'll have to come back. We would come back here. I'm just, you know,
Absolutely.
we're sort of coming and going, so you always lose time in terms of travel, much more than you think. People are diverting off for cups of coffee and going to the bank and the post office in between. So you're hurting some cats sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned about that as well.
We'll try and maybe plan a little bit of extra time in there in the schedule for travel.
Okay.
And then just to check in, June 4th, we already have 2 commissioners that aren't going to be here. I just want to do a check-in with George and Rachel that you haven't had any plans come up. And then we had our joint open space and trails meeting planned for the 3 board members. Is that something we still want to? I think it's fine to move forward with 3. But I'm just going to keep checking in with you, make sure we don't lose one.
Yeah, no, I have no other plans. As I said, I anticipate driving over to Summit County after that meeting for the IBCC meeting the next day, so that if, the schedule is shifting, let's shift it to end earlier rather than to start later.
Okay.
Of course, the pass will be open, hopefully, too.
Hopefully,
And that's all I have on future agendas.
Okay. Steve?
There were, on Tuesday, June 18th, you have a date for the EOTC meeting of February 28th, and I was wondering what that date is actually supposed to be, the Snowmass Village.
yeah, it says
Oh, that-
February. It was like a
Yeah,
computer ghost.
Is that a June 28th?
It should be a June 28th.
June
yes.
28th, okay.
I'll double check that.
Okay, yeah, because the
Steve.
28th is a Friday in my calendar. So it'd be
We're going to need to double check that.
Thursday,
That's
the
clearly
27th.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for catching that.
And we're still working in terms of trying to set up our next quarterly meeting with the U.S. Forest
Yeah,
Service?
Susan's reached out to the Forest Service, so we're just going to see what their availability is. Fortunately, it looks like the weather is cooperating to extend out our fire season a little bit, so.
I just finally found it. June 20th is what I have down for the EOTC,
June 20th. We'll double check. That's clearly we don't have the right.
and that's a Thursday, so that makes more sense.
Yeah, so the 0 is a type, the 8 is a typo.
And the month.
And the month. We better check the time
And the
too.
year. Okay, anything else on future agendas, Rachel?
Well, yeah, George, just since you mentioned the Forest Service quarterly, you know, I remember last year we ended up missing our kind of joint meeting with Lake County because we got towards the fall, scheduling it and back and forth, and just to kind of put that out there as a tickler, we should try to, you know, accomplish that sooner this year so that we don't end up with past closures or schedules conflicting with that.
Okay. Looks good. Do you have any open discussions, John, that we could tackle in
Separate
20
from the
minutes?
memo?
I actually do not have any updates for you today.
Okay.
We could probably do the memos of interest, just doing the thank yous, and then maybe you guys will get another break here. So under MOIs, this would be the last item, item number 6. You do have thank you letters, and these again are for grants that have been received through the Healthy Community Fund. And these are thank you letters from Project Graduation, AVSC, an AVSC scholarship recipient, and Food Bank of the Rockies.
Okay, good.
Could go to board open discussion if there's.
Yeah, do we have any board open discussion? We've got about 15 minutes. Steve?
Do we want to, at some point, we should talk about Sal Pace's email, and maybe we could have enough time now to talk about that?
So you all received an email from Sal Pace. Rachel forwarded it to me this morning, and it was a question about the proposed legislation and the sales tax that's being proposed on marijuana. It wasn't clear to me whether it was medical or...
The recreational
It's
program.
recreational.
Amendment 64.
Yeah.
The proposal right now is that the state would levy a 10% sales tax, and then there would also be an excise. I don't have it right in front of me right
I
now.
think it's 15% excise.
15%.
The state would levy 50%, this is just a proposal. The state would levy 50% for both sales and excise. Local entities from where the tax was generated would receive 10% of the amount collected from the sales tax and none of the excise tax. In other words, we, the counties, would only receive a sales tax of 1.5% from the sales of marijuana. That's Sal's point.
And the question is that separate from the county sales tax? So would you be talking about a 25% plus here in Pickens County, you know, in the city limits 9.3, in the county a little less than that?
So I believe that the marijuana sales are subject to our local tax. I think this is an additional state tax. The way I'm reading it, it's an additional state tax that would have a local government share back of what is the equivalent basically of 1.5%. But I have not had time to research that to ensure that for some reason the recreational marijuana wasn't exempted from our local sales tax. I don't believe it was.
So does that mean then our overall tax, you're adding sales tax now onto local tax and
Correct.
county tax. So for residents in Pickens County, or perhaps even more important for residents of Snowmass Village or Aspen, that starts to push their overall sales tax up
up and up and
For
up.
that one product.
Just for that one
Just for that
product.
one product, okay. thank you.
Yeah, just for the one product. And again, I haven't had time to go back and research this. I just read the email at the beginning of this meeting, actually, and so I need to go back and research it. But my belief right now is that this state tax would be in addition to our local sales taxes and, quite frankly, the fees that we, right now, at least in terms of medical marijuana dispensaries and such, we're collecting fees to process the licensure and such. We have not yet gotten the rules issued through the state to know what regime we're going to be operating under for the recreational marijuana.
So Sal's point in this email to us is that he believes that the state should be giving local entities back a larger share than the 10% of the sales tax that is generated, since the local entities will be conducting the vast amount of work to implement Amendment 64. So he feels that the county should receive more dollars to offset the costs in terms of administrating and all the other work that's involved. And he also says that there's a tight timeline here. The bill is to be heard in committee this Thursday. No, at this point, they haven't heard any negative responses from any of the other counties against this proposal. So Sal was reaching out in terms of trying to generate some support, either to raise these concerns so they could actually perhaps adapt that bill a little bit or change it, the proposed bill.
In the absence of information about what our licensing regime and what our capabilities to charge fees are, it's difficult to provide you any analysis. And so this bill is a little bit out of sequence with the rulemaking, at least as it relates to local government. And that might be why they haven't gotten a lot of response, because local governments don't know what to do with it. I would tend, with the lack of information about what those rules are going to be and what local governments' fee capabilities are going to be to cover those licensure costs and what the costs are going to be to administer the regime, it would make more sense to err at a higher proportion, I think, to local governments. And then maybe adjust that depending on where the rules end up. I have no idea right now what the rules are going to say.
Steve, Rachel?
The discussion at CCI about the bill was that even with the 30%, that is still a lower tax rate than alcohol pays right now, and that they were anticipating that there would also be a local sales tax added on to that, which would bring it more in line with what the tax on alcohol is right now. And I also remember that, without having refreshed my memory on the notes, that a big chunk, maybe 10% of the, I can't remember the exact figure, a big chunk of the excise tax was earmarked for school construction cost around the state. So I think different parts of this bill, they have it earmarked exactly, this much money's going into the general fund for the state and different things. I think maybe that's why there wasn't a reaction from the commissioners there, that they were anticipating they could add on their own county sales tax to help defray the local cost.
George, I would kind of think that if maybe appropriate if we have a brief letter from our manager drafted and sent on behalf of the board to express the concerns which John has outlined, that given that we don't know, if there'll be limits on how much we can charge on licensing or whether we'll be able to recapture our real costs there, that a slightly higher percentage as a share back would be appropriate to counties. I understand what you're saying, Steve, and I don't want to eat into that, public good that will be created by additional funds in the school construction fund. But on the other hand, there may be additional costs to counties going forward that are separate from just the regulation and the licensing. You know, it may increase some of our social services costs. It may, you know, bleed in more into sheriff's costs in terms of enforcement and making sure that product is not reaching those not eligible for it or underage and things like this. And so I can understand why this is laddered up, as you said, similar to alcohol, because it's going to take that entire regulatory framework, and the states seem to have determined that they really didn't throw enough resources towards the enforcement regulation of the medical marijuana. And you know, this is a pretty big step for any state, and so I think it's better to be a little safe than sorry and making sure you're covering your costs, and as a county we need to do that. So I mean, that would be my suggestion. It's just a letter from John expressing concerns and support that, you know, there are unanticipated costs that counties will be responsible for, and you know, list a few of those areas, and that, you know, a greater share back. I mean, I try to push for 2.5% instead of 1.5% or something like that. That'd just be my thought.
Board?
I agree with that.
Yeah, I can go with that.
Okay.
I'll draft something up and...
Yeah, given the timeliness
on it.
that
Yeah.
you just can put out under your name for the board.
Okay. Anybody else have anything for open discussion?
No, I don't have anything today.
No? Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break. We've got an interview coming in at 3 o'clock. Grassroots will take a 10-minute break.
I was going to bring it up in open discussion for the school board, but we have that problem.
All right, we're on to our citizen board interview, and this is, I'll probably pronounce your name wrong, Michelle Bonfield-Seibel.
Oh, you're close.
Close. And Michelle is reapplying for PZ as a renewal, so thank you very much for your continual interest. And you probably know the format. We'll just go around and ask a series of questions. Who would like to start? Rachel?
Well, actually, a re-app is a little different than initial. It's a chance for us to get feedback from you about how you feel the board is operating and what ways, what challenges you're facing, or what ways we might be of more assistance in fulfilling your mission. So, I'm really just going to turn it right back to you and collect any of your thoughts on those areas.
I guess I'll start with the caseload meetings. The caseload meetings are run really well, and the staff reports are really helpful. We don't obviously have very many of those right now, but there's nothing I would change there. Those seem to go great, and we have plenty of information, and staff is always really prepared there, so that's great. We are working on the Western Maroon Creek master plan, and that one has been a little more challenging because we've had many meetings, and there has been some, I'm calling it meeting fatigue, from having so many meetings scheduled, and I know I'm certainly happy to, and I think most of the P&Z board is happy to meet, occasionally more often than twice a month, but we maybe had a series of 8 Tuesdays in a row, or at least it was 6, and it was quite a few. And sometimes it just seemed like those meetings weren't as productive as they could have been because maybe the staff didn't have enough time to actually work on the plan in between the meetings. So it just made the meetings feel longer because we didn't have a lot to talk about. But otherwise, and I know we just got, the P&Z just got an email from Suzanne about rescheduling the meetings, and that we're going to have those at a more regulated pace, and that'll help the staff too, I think, get the time they need to actually draft the plan. So that would be my main feedback for where we are right now. Otherwise, it seems to be going really well, and I still think John Howard is just like the best chair ever. The meetings are so well run, and he really deals with the adversaries and takes in the comments so well. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
So Michelle, you're actually involved in the redevelopment of the base of Buttermilk with the homeowners at the end of Aspen. At least that's what I read on your resume.
I was.
You were, okay. Because my question was, with the Western Maroon master plan going on, this is an integral part of that. Do you have a conflict of interest?
Right. No, I worked with those homeowners. I think it's been at least 5 years. It might be going on 6 now. 6 years ago. I took a sabbatical from my planning consulting position and went to train horses and horse show full time, and I'm still horse showing.
Okay.
So it's been some time.
Okay, great. Other questions? Steve?
We have your resume up through 2008, but I'm wondering what you're doing. Well, you worked on the Burlingame project too, but then are you still doing projects for the city of Aspen, or what are you doing now?
No, right now I am strictly horse showing, and I run a training business out at Cozy Point Ranch, and I was interested in being on the board to keep a finger in planning and development that's going on. I left the development world, I think it's been about 6 years now, when the economy tanked. I got lucky and I got out before it really went under, and I haven't leaped back in both feet quite yet. I'm actually in the process of starting a riding team for the high school, so this keeps kind of me interested, and I feel like I have something to contribute because I'm a certified planner and grew up in the valley, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for your service on that, and we all gather that the whole board will probably be glad when the Western Maroon planning process is over, because you've worked really hard on that.
Thanks.
Rob? Do you think there's a good balance of opinions on the board at this point?
I do. I have to say, I don't know our new board members quite yet, so it's hard to judge from there. But between John and Mirta and Lexi and Jim and Monty, I think you get a little bit of everybody there. Some pro-development, some anti-development, some just a little bit of everything. So.
And in following that up, in the packet that you put back together, you talked about having a clear definition of the board's charge, because sometimes opinion really isn't the point of the board's charge, is it? And how does that play into how the board has acted over the time that you've been on it?
Mm-hmm. I think it's been interesting because now having maybe some more attorneys on board is sort of leveling out the opinion a little bit more, which is good in some ways and maybe not great in others, but mostly it creates more dialogue, so it's generally a positive thing. So people are reaching more to the land use code and what's allowed rather than what feels good. So it seems to be balancing itself out pretty well. And generally, it's been interesting. Our board on caseload work, we seem to be voting almost unanimously on everything, and with a lot of discussion coming. So that feels good.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you again for the feedback. Do you feel the board, I think our board would represent seeking that sort of balanced approach between development and private property rights and mitigation and fit and character with the communities. So, maybe very cautious growth, slow growth, whatever term people are using. Do you feel there's good alignment between the P&Z and your board in terms of those goals? And, how's it been taken when something does come up to our level and we, may add more restrictions or modify your decision at some level? Is the communication okay on that, or is it just left a lot of people going, well, what are they thinking?
That's a hard one because I think most of the things that we've reviewed in the caseload haven't gone on to you guys. I think there's been a lot of site reviews. But I think overall we've had discussion when we're talking about maybe the West of Maroon master plan. Who's interested, what's the city interested in, what's the county interested in, and I think there's a confidence on the P&Z about us having some alignment with your goals and your perspectives, and that we're all supporting each other. And there's some concern about that from, whether the city is on board with the county, and that just is how it goes. But I think that I certainly feel like we're all on board. I think we're not. I know in the past when I was a planner full-time, I always felt like, well, it doesn't matter what the P&Z says because the next board's going to do the opposite anyway, and that doesn't seem to be the case or the feeling that we have. So,
And I guess one last follow-up on that would then be, especially when you talk about the dialogue on the board members and following the code versus desires and so on, do you feel you're seeing any holes in our code or areas of improvement in our code that we should be taking a look at?
Not yet. I mean, it's so tricky because we just really haven't had very many things come in front of us.
Right.
So I'm trying to think of something that was controversial. We did do that code amendment, Lance, for what on the backside of Aspen Mountain.
The change the growth management criteria for rural remote.
Yeah.
Yes.
But that was such a minor. It seemed more administrative than substantial.
Well, I would just kind of put it out there that that's something that is part of your roles if you're ending up feeling that you're giving approval to something that you would prefer not to because our codes kind of shunted you in that direction, that you should, bring it to Lance and then bring it to us, and we can talk about whether, there are problems or loopholes or conflicts that we should all address. Okay.
Any other questions for Michelle? Well, thank you again for reapplying, and we will get back to you in hopefully fairly quickly.
Great, my pleasure, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to go back to memos of interest. We've got some staff here.
Yeah, I think I saw Brian come in. So the first MOI we have is a supplemental budget request for various projects at the airport. And Brian, why don't you come on up? We have Brian Grief here. And Brian, why don't you go ahead and give an overview of the projects that are in this request?
Absolutely.
And Jim is here also.
I apologize. I had 3:30 on my calendar. So. Apologize for the delay.
Oh, we did have
Oh,
the
you
break
did?
scheduled, yeah.
Yeah, we've been ahead of ourselves all
Are
day.
planes flying out of the airport right now?
Yes. We missed a couple first thing this morning.
My niece is supposed to be flying out here shortly in the direction of Denver.
Still looked okay when I left. So it is a relatively large supplemental request, and really what a lot of it is cleanup from some items that we consciously didn't budget for during the regular cycle because we just didn't have enough information. And then also we're getting close to close out on a few projects. I'll go into some detail on that. And really just getting ready for closeout. The first two are the most, substantial ones. First is the airport design guidelines and surface transportation study. That stems out of recommendations from the board during the master plan process to go forward, actually stemming from comments from P&Z to look at this and come up with guidelines on what any future development or improvement should look at the airport, and then the transportation study that associates with access to the airport. You may recall I came to you shortly after the first of the year with just a blank supplemental request. Received good feedback from you all that we should go through the RFP process first, to have a good idea of what it'll cost, and that's what this reflects. We went through the county's RFP process, completed it, and actually have a firm number that we can use. What this will actually look like, I really don't want to spend a lot of time on it today, and the reason for that is I'd like to bring this to the board in a supplemental work session and really get your feedback. Because that's what the essence of this is what the county with the BOCC wants the airport to go, the direction it wants to go. So I'm not really prepared to answer that at this time, but in future work sessions, as we get into the contract, bring the successful bidder in, and that's when we would go into some more detail and see what you all would like out of this process.
I have a little question on that.
I think where we're going is that we have a scope of work as far as the deliverables and outcomes and such that was defined in the RFP, as well as an outline of the public process. And what we want to bring back to you is our recommendations on the public process and creating an advisory committee and getting some feedback there, some discretion really within the proposal on how to structure that. And so that's a part that we want to workshop more. But in terms of design guidelines, or rather, they're kind of a technical, the outcome of that process is going to be a technical document that describes how facilities will be developed on the airport, both east and west, any future development on the airport from a visual perspective, materials perspective, energy, those sorts of things.
All right, thanks for clarifying that. So really, it's going to be more of a input from us in terms of the public process, similar to what we just did with the open space and trails staff. Okay, thank you.
Any other question on the design guidelines before I move on? Improvements associated with the fire suppression system upgrade. This is a project we've really been working on for a couple of years now. During inspections, we've noticed there are some deficiencies in the existing terminal building. Last year, we started an exploration project to see how we could bring it up to more current standards. Started out with replacing some heads that could be more efficient and a survey of what the building looks like. This project is really the result of that survey. We've identified roughly 5 areas or so within the terminal that do need work to bring it up to current code.
I'm Vanna White, impersonation here.
So 4 areas.
Just to kind of orient you a little bit, this is the roadway side of the terminal building. This is the ticket counter and check-in area, security, and then baggage claim. And the areas marked in blue are all areas that we've worked through. We now have a solution to make sure that the fire protection system meets the expectations of all the parties involved, specifically the fire marshal. The green area is an area that we've made recommendations. We're really close to having completely refined. We believe the answer exists here, but in complete disclosure, we wanted you to know that's the small area that hasn't been fully clarified in terms of its scope of work. We feel pretty good about it, but it's not 100% defined. I could go into the details about the changes that occur in each section if you'd like, but an example might be here, this outbound baggage, which is an exposed outdoor area. We're going to go to a dry pipe kind of system in that area to make sure that it wouldn't freeze and those kind of things. So there's an upgrade in dimension to the pipe reaching out to the TSA security area. Those are the kind of things we're talking about in this project.
So with the price, you'll notice that it is more than sprinkler head upgrades. Involves not just fire suppression system, pipes, water, etc. There's also some access control, so we're modifying exit, crash bar, the dry pipe that Jim talked about. Really just a comprehensive look. What I will say about this is we've been working closely with the fire marshal, and he's actually been supportive, recognizing there is a problem, but working with us to figuring out what the best solution is to it.
I might note that's way down from some earlier concepts that have been worked. So we've been value engineering and trying to find the right matching the safety against the actual investment. So I think everybody is comfortable at this point.
Questions before I move on?
Well, just, I know we're in an awkward place because of if and when there would be a new terminal versus expenditures today. And so if these were made, do you believe there's then a useful life that it would extend at least the fire safety aspects of the current terminal for 5 years, 10 years?
The answer is yes, Rachel. We obviously, when we went into the building, and this structure's got some challenges, as you are so keenly aware, is to find the right balance between making sure that we're maintaining a very high safety standard versus the quantity of dollars, because this project easily could cost many times more. We think we found the right balance. It really was kind of targeted at a 5+ year kind of target zone, not having good direction or knowledge about when we might make sizable changes to the terminal. It's been like other issues at the airport. We've replaced sections of the roof along the way, and if you knew you were going to stay in this property forever and ever, you might make a brand new higher 20 or 30-year roof versus a 10-year roof in those kind of decisions, and that's kind of reflected here. It was why the communication, the people who design these kind of things, the fire marshal and all of us, there was a lot of really nice give and take about how we could best do this and protect the the public's interest.
Thank you.
Questions? No? The de-ice pad, that is the 2012 project. We're actually getting very close to closing that out, which is very good news. It's actually a pretty quick, pretty efficient project. Really what the amount is there is to cover some change orders that were needed for safety and workability. $5.5 million contract represents a pretty small percentage of that. Can't do the math in my head right now. So that's just getting it ready for closeout. Really a lot of the same, or about the same story on the next two line items, AAP 45 and 44. 45 does have one nuance in that there was a grant amendment, $1.3 million grant amendment.
From the FAA.
From the FAA, so this is funded. That wasn't properly carried forward in 2012. So this brings that forward, and the difference between the 1.3 million and the 1,062,820 is what we expect to turn back, so project savings.
There's actually some good news. The FAA is pretty happy to know that they'll be getting about $300,000 back from that project for them to put to use someplace else. So, good news.
AAP 44 was originally budgeted based on estimates, and this reflects final closeout cost there. Moving down the ITT Excellus lease, this is something that we're actually pretty excited about. I'll be talking potentially more in detail tomorrow during a regular meeting. But what this is a company that's coming in to install an antenna for the FAA to work with ADSB. ADSB is communication. It's considered FAA's next generation initiative to communicate between ground-based stations at airports and along the route and equipment in the plane. It gives real-time data of where other aircraft is, where they're at speed, just a lot of information. Having this on site is a benefit to the airport. That being said, we're still getting, I guess, what I would call retail value for the lease. It's in the AOC, basically attic and a cupola. It's really out of sight, not being used, designed for this type of use. But the rates are the same as what we're charging for AT&T for similar type of space.
On a square foot basis.
Exactly.
The ADSB, or Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, one of the great things about that is a technological step forward for airplane operators who have the equipment on board. And ultimately, all aircraft will need to have that equipment on board by 2020. But it gives for the first time data transfer that's not done over the radio. So they'll be able to get additional information from air traffic. They can get weather data, all kinds of. It's a wireless data program for aircraft, and it's kind of core function. So it's pretty neat stuff.
Rachel? Yeah, what was that acronym standing for again?
Well, it's actually spelled out in here. It's Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast, or ADSB.
Okay.
And you'll probably hear more about that. You might even hear about it on the nightly news from time to time. It's a general move in this next gen. What FAA calls next gen is that they're going to move away from all ground-based navigation aids. So like our localizers at the airport ultimately will not be required. The radar that's up on the mountain that we see spinning, there'll come a date and time that the FAA's forecast that those items will no longer exist on the ground, and it'll all happen through satellite and then ground-based data links like this.
Okay. Just so I understand, what is the business model that once it's installed? So this is like us preparing the site for them to install it and install it. But who is paying the revenue that then pays that lease rate? Are the pilots who've chosen more sophisticated aircraft that can hook up into this now? Or where's the revenue stream come from?
Great question. A couple of areas. One is the FAA has committed a lot of their funds toward creating this system. Additionally, You'll have a cafeteria plan of data subscriptions that you'll be able to pick from over time as a aircraft operator, and so you'll have choices about what you want and find helpful to you. That'll be a revenue stream. The FAA's used this private contractor to help kind of build that whole network and operate it on their behalf. So that's how the money flows.
Okay, so we'll have no responsibility if this new cutting-edge technology still has a few kinks to be worked out in it. That will be between the contractor and the FAA to make sure it's operating up to specs.
Yes, we are a pure landlord in this environment, where they're going to lease space from us, and the way the lease is written, their responsibility is to maintain all that equipment. Our responsibility is to create a roof over the site.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the Excellus lease? Airport right-of-way easement and support services. This stemmed from the Highway 82 underpass project, but we're really taking it the next step further to make it a usable, I guess, document. Really what it is, as you're all aware, the FAA has contributed money to do property at the airport. And this looks at the easements, utility easements, et cetera, that go on this FAA Exhibit A property. And what we're developing out of this, stemmed from the Highway 82 underpass project, is a document that we can use for future easements, if we do need to go down that path for whatever reason. So we'll have, I guess, a template to develop easements on Exhibit A property.
Part of what happened here is that the current utilities that had existed along Highway 82 at this site prior to the construction beginning were all on highway right-of-way. Well, all those utilities are being moved onto airport property that was purchased with FAA funds. So we have to make sure that each of those were all documented and done exactly right, make sure that the construction takes place to our satisfaction, and make sure that all the pieces fit. As Brian mentioned, though, this will have advantage to us over time. We'll have a template to work from.
And the final project I have is PFC application. Through the FAA regulation, we are allowed to collect what are called passenger facility charges, that's what the PFC stands for, on departing passengers as they depart the airport. Any project that we use this money for has to be approved from the FAA, and that's really what this process is. It sets up our next PFC application that identifies lists of projects, gives the FAA, gives any air carriers that use the airport or that originate from our airport and, say, connect through Lufthansa or something like that. It gives them an opportunity to comment on the projects if they have any concerns. Assuming there aren't any, we can move forward with another application and keep collecting the PFC revenues. What that equates to is $4.50 per leg per passenger traveling out of the airport, up to 3 legs. And yeah, that I guess to the bottom line of the airport, annually we receive about $900,000 in PFC revenues. This continues that authorization.
There's some good news in this. One is they have to do a new application. You have to do that before they expire, because you tell the FAA a certain number of projects what you estimate they're going to cost, and then you collect the monies toward that project. You may recall in some of the master plan work we talked about PFC revenues as part of financial planning work. The reason this is back in front of you sooner than it might have been was a very positive development, and that was that we had about $1 million worth of snow removal equipment in the current PSC application. And we were collecting toward that, and then we had a follow-up conversation with the FAA, and they substituted grant dollars in lieu of. So you'll be seeing a grant from the FAA to approximately $1 million here in the next few weeks as the FAA sends it out to us. And that will take that money out of the PFC collection side replace it with grant dollars, which is a very positive thing for us. It goes straight to the bottom line for us in this case, because we've already purchased that equipment, and recharges our reserves, does some positive things for us. But it means that we shortened the window that the PFC collection would take place, so now we need to go back out and do some of this.
That's the last comment I will make. It has a negative change, or a net decrease in revenues by $419,161. That would be made up from the airport fund. Fund balance before the request, $7,494,114. After the request, $7,074,953.
Not counting the million I just described.
That would come in there eventually.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
I'm supportive.
No. Yeah, good work.
Good. Thank you so much.
Balance and John.
You guys sit in these old chairs. Plastic ones again.
Okay, what's next?
Okay. Our next memo of interest is another budget supplemental request. This is for a position increase in community development. This was an item that we already discussed in work session, but we do have Brian Prawl here to answer any questions that the board may have. And we could do an overview if you'd like.
Yeah, why don't you just give us a brief overview, review?
Sure. Okay. As it was said, it's a budget supplemental request to reinstate two positions that were taken away in the past few years. One was the front desk building technician position. The other is putting the 60% employee back to a 40%, the additional 40% to put them back to 100% FTE. We came at the first of the year with a buy-up letting you know that this would probably be the case, and we would look for trigger points. And we have seen in the budget with Connie and John Redmond's review, helping us with that we are hitting some of those trigger points as far as where our budget's heading, and also in workload. So with the combined increased workload and the combined revenue, we hope to be able to take that money and bring back those positions that we've been suffering at the loss of.
So we did have more of an in-depth work session on this, but my question is, because we had downsized during the recession, and now because construction activity is coming back up, we're going to sort of bring back those positions. We're really not new positions, but reactivating these old positions. But how do we ensure, it's hard to ensure, but let's say over a 5-year plan that this is going to be sustainable?
You know, maybe I'll jump in here. There's a couple of ways. One of the reasons we made these pending positions was so we could take the time to really analyze what was happening with the trends. And so we have, just based on the change in activity and fee collections that we're seeing, and that is now over multiple years. And I'm doing this from memory from last time, but we saw a 6% overall growth in 2011, I believe a 11% growth in 2012. And the number that's reflected that's showing $100,000 surplus actually drops back down to the 3% increase that we've held consistent with our financial advisory board. So we believe that this surplus number as it stands is a conservative number. Furthermore, as we discussed with you in the work session, we are also initiating some administrative changes to how we're doing value determinations and such, which we believe is also going to have a positive impact. We haven't accounted for any of that here yet. We wanted to see really what that new basis is, but we believe that there's actually going to be additional surplus over and above this. So we have some buffer right now, given current activities. So if we saw a little bit of fluctuation, that we are still staying even or in the black with this increase. Really, this is to just keep us at an acceptable, really, level of service right now as we head into building season.
All right, thank you. Other questions?
I'm supportive.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Seems to be the day of budget supplementals. This one actually it is, we have Human Services. I can't see behind the
Yep.
pillar. Okay, I see Kim standing up and Nan. This is for a caseworker for our Elgibel facility, particularly in child welfare. And this is pursuant to the agreement that we entered into with Eagle County. And I'll let Nan and Kim explain, but we've seen volumes, caseload volumes go up a little bit more than we expected. A lot more.
All right. Yeah, as you all are aware, our IGA with Eagle County started October 1st, and we hired a full-time caseworker. And the first 2 weeks were pretty quiet, and then from that point on, we've had double of what we expected in terms of workload. It's been pretty daunting, I would say, and the one thing that we never wanted to compromise were services for any child, and particularly in the children that we're responsible for in Pickens County. And so we went, after trying several ways to create efficiencies, we went back to the drawing board in February when we realized that this wasn't going to change much, and we completed a white paper and shared it with them and said that we basically needed additional staff to move forward with this agreement so that we didn't compromise services for children and families. We talked about it some more, and they agreed to fund another full-time caseworker to serve the whole area. And so that's what this request is. They are fully funding it, and we are so it's a cost-neutral situation, but it's basically to make up for the volume that we've identified in that area.
Rachel?
Well, I support this. It's, again, revenue neutral to Pickens County. But looking through the three alternatives that you had given Eagle County, and their solution was a temporary solution and then an annual review, I would just be concerned about how that may run into their budget processes, and so that they definitely keep a placeholder to be able to fund that position in 2014. I'd be more comfortable with a 2-year temporary solution than one because of the training costs involved, and then kind of reshuffling our system a little bit, and then if we just have to shuffle back again so quickly, it would be problematic. But it is responding to the needs and cares of their community and their citizens, and we're just the ones helping to administer the program. So I don't think there's really a going back to them to ask them to make it a 2-year, but I think that would just be really, really important to assure that they're holding that as a potential constant going forward.
It's a good point, and it's actually, I think, maybe an issue more of semantics, actually, because we had this discussion with them. And where we landed, I think, is basically all of our agreements are on an annual basis based on budget appropriations. So they have a placeholder for long-term, and they just need to budget it each year. So it looks like, and what we said here is they chose the temporary solution because that's what they were talking about initially, but it's actually a longer-term commitment.
That's all I need to hear, so that they have looked at what the longer-term effect to their general fund budget would be, should the need and the demand continue.
Yeah.
Okay, Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve?
Do you have a caseworker waiting in the wings who can slip right in? Perhaps somebody who had worked for Eagle County or something previously, or what's the process you go through in getting a new person?
That's a good question, and we actually thought we had someone waiting in the wings. I always have people in the wings in case we were able to or need to hire someone new. And that did not pan out, and that person actually worked for Eagle County and provided some services for us when we were in our kind of crisis mode. They offered her services to us for about a month. And so the position that we're in right now is we need to post the position, which we did yesterday, and of course pending the approval here, we'll follow up with applications and interviews and all of that. So I feel pretty confident that we're going to find someone good, because I think that the team that we have has a great reputation, and I think that people want to work with us. So I'm hoping that it will move fast, and that we will have someone who's already had child welfare experience, because the training is pretty. There's just a lot of training that occurs before someone actually even works with a family. Mm-hmm. So we hope that doesn't delay us.
Okay.
We've been lucky because we actually pay higher than any other county for caseworkers, because we're a dead end, because we need to recruit mature caseworkers. And so we feel confident that Pickens County will attract good caseworkers in the next 2 weeks. Keep our fingers
What do you mean when you said the word dead end?
Well, I mean that literally, right? In the winter, you can't go any farther. That's all I meant, geographically. Yeah, no. Otherwise, it's a great opportunity here. We're known to have a very strong team at the state. Kim was just at a conference. She got a lot of compliments about our team, and we think that we can attract. What we're looking for is a mature caseworker, someone who's had experience and can hit the ground running, pick up a caseload, and get going.
So it's not a dead-end position?
It's not a dead-end position. In fact, no, it's a great opportunity.
We love our job.
Thank you for clarifying that, George.
Any other questions? Everyone okay with this? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next two items, we have our county clerk, Janice Voss-Caudill, here to talk to us about elections legislation that's pending.
And I asked Bill to come with me because he happens to be more involved in one of the issues that Rachel had asked about 3 weeks ago for me to bring forward. So what I'm bringing forward to you are two items. Rachel had mentioned in a work session about 3 weeks ago the uniform voting system that the Secretary of State is moving forward with, and I wanted to give an update on that. And Bill is involved in a committee working with that project as well. But just as important, I felt that at this time, as a 1,000-foot overview, I would share with you House Bill 1303, because I know that you have an interest in that as well, and so does the community. I've received a couple calls on it. And what I'd like to do in talking about House Bill 1303, which is the Voter Access and Modernized Election Act, give you what are the trends, why, and to walk through that there are 8 or 9 different pieces that would change election law, and an overview, a brief overview of what those are, and let you know where we're at in legislation right now. With that, I am bringing for you tomorrow at a regular meeting a resolution to pass a mail ballot election, which we talked about. And why I'm doing this is because you never know what's going to happen when a bill goes through legislation, right? You don't know what's going to happen. So where this bill is at the present time is it's made its way through House, and tomorrow, as a matter of fact, it will be in front of Senate committee, and I think by Friday, if my information is correct, it'll be at the Senate floor. I don't see any major amendments, but if there are some amendments, I'm assuming that'll go back to the House. So that gives you an idea of the steps we're watching. Okay. The bill, to share with the community the trends with elections throughout the state of Colorado, is since 1993, in odd-year elections, counties have been able to implement all mail ballot elections, and many counties throughout, 64 counties throughout the state of Colorado have been implementing mail ballot elections. So, you know, in the course of time, you have some counties implementing all mail ballot, and we historically have implemented polling place elections, but in fact, in 2009 and 2011, we did implement mail ballot. And through our budget process, we anticipate in the odd years, the next 3 years out, implementing mail ballot. The trend is based on, and exponentially, people are voting by mail ballot. So to give you an example of the trend, in this last election in 2012, 72% of the electorate in the state of Colorado voted by mail ballot. 10% voted early voting, and the remainder voted at the polls, or what's called a vote center. Many counties have gone to vote centers. What is a vote center? A vote center is like a one-stop shop where the center is hooked into or through internet have access to the state registration system, and you can service at that point all electorate, much like we do in early voting here, but we send people out to the office to update their information, etc. So in comparison, in Pitkin County in 2012, our mail ballot, our electorate, 45% of them voted by mail, which I think, in my opinion, is high considering that we never have really implemented mail ballot over the course of time the last 20 years. And I have not mailed out brochures promoting permanent mail ballot, which went into effect in 2008, let's say. Right. Many counties have mailed out flyers for permanent mail ballot. What is permanent mail ballot? Permanent mail ballot is that an elector will receive a mail ballot for every single election that a county implements. Okay, and that's a primary in the summer or a November election every year. Another statistic to throw out to you in the public is, so what's moving this? If you look at the 9 counties in the state of Colorado that have 125 electorate or more, they make up 78% of the electorate in the state of Colorado. 81% of those electorate vote by mail. And Bill cost out for me the other day, we were talking about, well, what's the cost of a mail ballot for an electorate versus going to the polls? And it is substantially less.
Yeah.
There's cost savings associated with it. So those will give you some of the statistics. Pitkin County has, 45%, which I mentioned earlier. If you look at the counties that have 50% or less electorate that vote by mail in their county, there are 6 counties. They're Kit Carson, Gilpin, San Juan, Pitkin County. And we make up 0.9% of the electorate in the state of Colorado. So that kind of gives you a picture of the political environment in addressing the background of this bill. So that gives you an idea of the trends. There are 8 to 9 pieces in this bill that I'd like to review with you briefly. And that includes, it'll change residency requirements, registration requirements. It's a mail ballot election. It's a distribution method. Okay. Also voter service and polling centers, which I call service centers. Drop-off locations. Inactive fail to vote status will change, as well as accuracy of voter information, which I think is important to know. And there will be created a commission to review, if this bill does go through, review after 2014 and after 2016 to assess the operations. So going back to the first side of my mission, residency. Present day, if someone registers, they have to have established their residency in the county and the precinct for 30 days or more in order to register to vote. That will change to 22 days prior to the election, okay? which will be the minimum time an elector must reside in Colorado. Not just not the precinct, but in Colorado. Okay. In reference to registration, right now you have to register to vote 29 days before the election, and that is changing, that is being expanded, that persons may register up until election day. Right? So more specifics regarding that is there's timelines associated with that. So for a registration drive, if you're involved in a registration drive, or registration agencies, NAM was just here. Health and Human Services is a registration agency, that's an example. Or if what has just been changed, also if you are your driver's license, if you're at a driver's license facility and obtaining your driver's license, that's another place where you can register. So you have to have completed that 22 days or more before the election at those different levels. The next one is 8 days. You can go online and register to vote through the statewide voter registration system through internet and register to vote. If you can do that if you have a driver's license, a Colorado driver's license. Okay, so that's associated with that driver's license. Okay. The third thing is that you can register in our office, the clerk's office, up until 7 o'clock on election day. So anytime you can come into our office and register, and we'll assist you. Also, we will be required to have vote centers within Pickens County, and you can register at the vote centers up until election day and on election day. So that's how this bill affects registration. The third piece that this bill changes is we will now mail ballots to all active registered voters. Okay, I've been reading different things, and some media are saying that we're sending mail ballots to everybody. It's to all registered Pickens County residents. It's a distribution method. All right? But along with that, to complement that, Pickens County specifically will be required to implement 3 vote centers, okay, on election day. Our office here will also have early voting, as we have in the past, but it'll be 15 days before the election. So that'll include the Saturdays, both Saturdays before the election and the Monday before the election. So it has extended early voting from 10 to 13 days. So it provides more opportunity for people who work during the week and don't have time, but can come in on the weekend and vote. Right? So we are considered a service center because we have access into the statewide voter registration system. And we will have to find 2 additional places throughout the valley to set up a service center. Right. Other things that a service center will do is it allows an eligible elector to register to vote on election day. So we'll have 3 service centers on election day. You can vote. You can update your address. You can change your name to change your name, your legal name. And if it's a primary election, if you are unaffiliated, you can walk in, affiliate with a party, and vote at the vote center. Okay. The other thing it allows an elector to do is to cast a ballot. So that might be in the form of walking in and dropping off your mail ballot and casting it, or it might be you walk in and you want to vote at that vote center, and you receive a paper ballot, like you do at a polling place historically have done, and cast your ballot. Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, is it will have secure computer access to the statewide voter registration system. The facilities, those 3 vote centers, will be ADA compliant. Okay, we'll have voting booths. You'll be able to replace a mail ballot at each vote center. If you've lost it and you still want to vote by mail, fill it out, put it in the envelope, sign it, and cast it. And we will also have provisional ballots available. The majority of provisional ballots will go away. We've had 215 provisional ballots in this last election. It takes time to process them. And the majority of them were cast. I think we had 10 that were not. But things that examples of why we might use a provisional ballot would be if somebody is here hunting from another county and has not established residency here, or if somebody has already, their mail ballot has come in already, or they early voted already. So we would just allow them, if they insist on voting, to vote, and that we'd process the provisional ballot. One of the other pieces that will change is, as you know, we have active registered voters, and if someone did not vote in the last election, their status is changed to inactive, failed to vote. And if you recall, in 2011, we mailed out by law to all active registered voters a mail ballot. That statute was challenged by Pueblo County and Denver. And through that challenge, the Secretary of State stated, if you wish to send out to inactive, failed to voters a mail ballot, you can do so. And we did. We did in Pickens County. So this bill will take away that inactive, failed to vote. And so when we talk about getting lists of active and inactive, what we will talk about if this bill goes through is inactive would be people who their mail's returned to us. And we know they probably don't live there anymore. One of the features that I particularly like is the accuracy of voter information. Starting in July, the Secretary of State, which he does already, will compare the voter registration list with a national change of address list. And if there is a change of address, we now have the authority within our office to update that address. Unlike in the past, we had to rely on the registered voter to provide us the information, the document to change it. And this will allow us to change it in the system. In addition to this, we already are comparing information with the Department of Motor Vehicle, Department of Revenue. It will expand that to compare information with the Public Health and Environment, basically it's vital statistics, which is deaths and deaths. And also with the Department of Correction, which would include felons who by law cannot vote. So we'll have more current information that we will be working with from our voter registration system. What I don't have incorporated in this outline for you is another piece of the legislation will provide us email. So as we start gathering emails from registered voters, we can send out information through our statewide voter registration system, emails to people. So we can send out when early voting starts, where our vote centers are, or service centers are, or whatever information throughout the year that you might want us to send out in reference to elections. And the last thing this bill does is it creates the Colorado Voter Access and Modernization Election Commission. I mentioned that earlier. It creates a commission that will review the implementation of this bill, how it works after the 2014 and after the 2016 election. Okay.
Good. So
does that help?
Yeah. So it seems to me the thrust of this bill is to encourage and enable citizens an easier way to vote from registration all the way through. My question is if that's the case. I mean, that's what my sense is. It's really geared towards the citizens.
The beauty of the vote centers also, if I didn't mention, is anyone within Pickens County can stop at any vote center. So if I live on this side of Basalt in Pickens County, and I'm headed up the valley to go to work, and I forgot to vote on election day, I can come over to the polling place in Aspen and vote. I don't have to go back down to Basalt. Or if I'm changing an address on election day, because I need to correct that, we can change that address, and we aren't sending you back out to the poll down in Redstone again to vote in your poll. You can vote at the vote center. So it does provide more access.
Yeah. So then what are the challenges for your office? More staffing needed, especially if you're looking at increasing the days where people are allowed to register from 13 to 15 days. You have some weekends involved.
We will staff with judges on the weekends, Saturdays, but there are things that are eliminated. For example, if I'm not, we when we have 10 precincts, we're working with an additional 60 judges. We're training an additional 60 judges, which takes us an entire week before the elections. Some things go away. And we did a cost analysis. It's an estimate. So Bill and I sat down and did a cost analysis comparing a mail ballot election in 2011 to last year's presidential election. And if we implemented this bill using last year's presidential election, what would that cost and what would that look like? So correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but off the top of my head, in 2011, it cost us $65,000, roughly a little bit more than that, $65,000 to implement a mail ballot election. The presidential last year cost us $112,000, a little over that. If we implemented this process last year for the presidential, it would have cost us $87,000. So there's a savings. And
It was about a 33%
32% drop. So a lot of that comes from labor and then working with the judges. So instead of manning so many polling places and working with the judges, we'll be manning fewer. We'll still be working with our mail ballot judges. That's in a controlled area that we supervise. Does that answer?
Yeah, and the mail ballot portion of this is, again, just for off-year elections?
No, it's every year.
Oh, it's every year.
Every election that we coordinate.
Yeah. So throughout the state of Colorado, for every county-run election, it will be the same for every year for every election. Sorry, I didn't mention that earlier. There won't be this switching back and forth with the different types of election. What I think what that will bring is it'll eliminate the confusion, and people will know how elections are operated throughout the state of Colorado. It's consistent from year to year.
Great. Rachel, then Rob?
Yeah, just kind of by background, and it's not so much new with these bills, but what is the security on a mail ballot? How do you verify the signatures and you know, make sure that's not people who are voting for roommates who moved away or things like that?
And Bill and I are talking about putting a video together of our process so we can put that on our website so people can view how we conduct our processes. There are other counties that already put videos out. For example, El Paso, Larimore County, Jefferson County. So if people want to go there right now, they can see that. But the steps we take, starting from receiving the ballot in, we stamp them and we scan them in the system. So they're immediately acknowledged. And people can track when we've sent their ballot out and when we've received it. They can go online into their record and we'll show them when we received it and scanned it into the system. Okay. And we batch our ballots and we bring them into our election judges. And the first thing we do is we provide them a report of what we've scanned into the system, and we make them balance to assure that we have given them every ballot we scanned into our department. The next thing, the judges, who are usually Democrat and Republican, tag team, review each signature with the signature on file in the statewide voter registration system. And usually a record would have multiple signatures. If we're lucky, we have more than one. Mm-hmm. So they make a determination, and by law, if one of them decides that's a match, it's accepted. But if both of them decide that is not accepted, we forward it to a reconciliation board who does a second review of the signature, right? And if it doesn't match, a letter is sent out. So there's three different reasons why we might send a letter out. Signature's missing, signature doesn't match, or we required an ID because perhaps they have registered through mail ballot and we haven't validated the ID. So we send letters out to the constituents immediately, and they have until 8 days after the election to cure that discrepancy, to assure their ballots voted. After we've reviewed the signature, we have a process in opening the ballots to assure anonymity So our judges cannot make a connection, and then we cast the ballots. Is that?
Yeah, that does. And can I do one little follow-up? You know, I would appreciate greater use of the national change of address system. I think a real caution in our area is that just because you move to another address doesn't mean you're not still picking up your mail at the P.O. box. Because there's an awful lot of addresses that might get, oh, they've changed their address, but Centennial's a classic example. You'll get over at, 410 Cohenhoven, but they still don't have a mail receptacle there, and they're still getting the post office box. So I think we have to be cautious with how we handle that information in our post office box system.
We do document. We address. We have a locator system. So an elector needs to provide their residence because that's hooked into our locator system, and an individual can provide a mailing address, a P.O. box, or if they're traveling or out for a month, we will send a ballot wherever you tell us to send a ballot.
Yep. And usually with a change of address with the Postal Service, they have different classifications. It could be a temporarily away. If you put a stop on your mail because you're going to be traveling for an extended period of time, that won't affect your voter registration through this change.
Okay. Thank you.
Rob? How did they come up with the number of 3 service centers for Picken County?
Well, it's based on population, so they did a 3-tier system.
Population and geographic location is a big aspect too.
Absolutely.
People having to drive.
Determining what your polling location is going to be. But they said if you have more than 10,000 active and inactive fail to vote voters, you are in tier 2, and they came up with that number. And then I'm not sure when you go into tier 3.
Over 25,000, I think it is. So we just tip into a tier 2, which require, otherwise you would only have 1. But we tip into the tier 2, so we're required to have 3.
And that's the minimum required. You could choose to have more.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You could choose to have more. Okay. And this is an overview, but I think it's important that if this does go through, to have additional work sessions in the future to talk about where do we put these service centers? How do we work with the community to discuss this? Bill is already working with GIS to determine who are the people that voted at the polls this last election and where's the concentration. But people move so they can go to any poll centers. So those are issues I think we need to discuss and make a determination on. Okay. And if it does go into effect, this bill passes, we will be implementing this in this fall, the November election.
Steve? Would you release the election results according to the precinct where the people live, just like you have done in the past?
One of the things, we've always reported results by method and by precinct, which creates many styles of ballots, which drives our costs. So we have mail ballot, we have polling place, and we have early voting, and then you have your styles in your precinct. What this bill will do is we'll have 2 methods. We'll have mail ballot method, and we'll have in-person method. And then you'll have your precinct reporting by each of those 2 methods.
Okay. That would
So
be.
yes, you will have a final outcome.
I
of that
never
precinct.
would have cared about that personally until running for office, and then it became extremely important.
I know, and it's never going to go away.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
I know that there was a lot of concern at the CCI meeting. The commissioners voted to monitor this bill, which neither support nor oppose it, but there were lots of concerns about possibility of voter fraud and different things, but it seems to me that this really provides more opportunities for voters to make sure their vote
More accessibility.
counts.
And Bill and I will always, I mean, that's foremost on our minds is fraud. And we hope and we rely on the community also and our judges to work with us to ensure that.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have serious concerns about the U.S. Postal Service, and I personally would never put my ballot in the U.S. mail to rely on it to get to you. But
Glad
if
you-
somebody does, now is there a way they can follow up and check to see if their vote counted?
Oh, absolutely. There's a couple different ways they can go about that. They are always welcome to call us. We can look up their record, see if we've received it. Plus, you can check online now at govotecolorado.com, and it will tell you whether or not your ballot's been received by us and on what day we received it, and it's right there.
Basically,
for
what you do is you go into the statewide voter registration, into your record, and then it has your own personal information, your address, all the districts you vote on, but there's information in there when we mailed your ballot and when we received it back.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing I wanted to mention also is Dropbox. People can drop their ballots at the vote centers. You can drop it in our office. We're talking about putting a 24/7 Dropbox outside of our office, which will require security surveillance.
It'll be 24-hour surveillance from a camera, and that'll be recorded and kept as an election record for 25 months. So if anybody's interested in making sure no one messed with the ballot box, it'll always be there for us.
So if someone puts a mail-in ballot into the Dropbox, that's counted, recorded as a mail-in ballot?
Yep.
Not an early voting or some other system? Okay.
Rachel?
Yeah, well, just to follow up on that, I think you kind of touched on it, but if you had put it in the mail and then you look it up and it doesn't look like it's received, and now today's election day, that's when you can go to a vote center and cast a provisional ballot, so that if you're...
Cast a ballot.
Well, if they put it in the mail, though...
If we haven't received it, we haven't gotten it yet. So
Right.
you could get a replacement ballot at that point in time. And it's always going to be the first ballot received is the one that's going to be counted.
Okay.
So if you voted on election day with your replacement ballot and then we received your ballot later, the first one that we get is the one that's going to be counted.
And those get reconciled when they get
When
put
they
into
get
the
entered
system.
into the score system, it's a date and time stamp, and they're going to go through the same signature verification process that any other mail ballot went through. And
We have the capability to do that because I mentioned earlier at each vote center, we will be live online with the state. So if the mail ballot hasn't come in yet, we will immediately update that and that void your mail ballot, allow you to vote in person or give you another ballot, mail ballot.
Yeah, two other really brief things. Janice, you said something, and I'm not sure if you misspoke or I have the wrong impression, but I was under the impression that felons are allowed to vote in Colorado once they have completed their entire term, which includes any parole.
Correct.
That's correct.
So it's not a lifelong prohibition against voting.
Correct. Thanks for clarifying that.
I think that's important. And then the second is just to say that, I've had a lot of hesitation about mail ballot, and fellow board members have heard some of those concerns in the past. What I particularly take comfort in this bill is the more agility with the voter registration timeframes, and that's been one of my real hesitations about that. But if you have an ability to literally do same-day voter registration and cast a ballot, and it wasn't the 30 days, and then it went to the wrong address, and, tracking it back and trying to not have to do a provisional ballot, and, a ballot that really matters, I feel those things start to work in tandem. And if it weren't for both provisions, I wouldn't be able to, get my arms around it. But given the improvements in registration processes, I think that this really is a step forward.
And we'll wait to see what happens with the final results at the state level.
We should know by the 8th of May, right?
Yeah, when the session ends.
When the session ends. Any other questions on that? If you want us to come back at any time, just give us heads up and we can prepare. If there's any statistics you want us to present, we're happy to do that. The other thing that we want to bring up to you and the community is that this has been under discussion for the last 2 years, I would say. Secretary of State Scott Gessler, is interested in creating a uniform voting system in the state of Colorado. So what does that mean? When you say uniform voting system, it can mean many different things. It can be everything from the voter registration system to all aspects of it. But specifically what you're talking to and asked about, Rachel, was the voting equipment. So that includes the software where we build the ballots, set up, and that includes the voting equipment where individuals cast their ballots and then uploading back into the software and generating reports. So that's specifically what we're talking about here. The Secretary of State, what I'd like to talk about is the boards that the Secretary of State put together and what they do, the scope of work that they're working on, how far they're at, a site that any individual within the community can go to just to keep up with the meetings that are going on, and then where the Secretary, where the Colorado Clerks Association stands and why, and then moving forward. So there are several different committees that the Secretary of State's putting together. One is called the Uniform Voting System Advisory Committee, and that consists of clerks. It consists of a county commissioner, I think, from Boulder. It consists of an accessibility advocate, 2 legislators, as well as the executive director of the Colorado County Clerks Association, who, as a matter of fact, is a past Colorado Secretary of State. And she was the chair of the Federal Elections Advisory Commission. So I think the committee is well represented. And in addition, the committee created a uniform voting system technical working group for advice, and that consists of election staff throughout the state of Colorado who have worked with all different types of voting systems. We use 4 different voting systems in the state. And we have Bill, who is also on that committee. He's a technical specialist, so he's on that committee as well. So he keeps us in tune to what's going on. The third committee that the Secretary of State will be assembling is called a public participation panel. So he wants the public to be involved in order to assess this as well and get input. Okay. So he'll be putting that together. So far, the advisory committee, they convened for their first meeting in January, have been meeting each month thereafter. And what they have done so far is they've defined the scope of the Uniform Voting System project, the scope of the project. They put together the technical working group. They defined what the Uniform Voting System is. And they've sent out a request for information to, 41 vendors? And they received about 16 responses back. And I think they've narrowed down to, 6 vendors that they know can meet the scope of work?
Yep. Some of them are traditional hardware-based vendors, and some of them are non-traditional software-based vendors. And they're still working on the scope and certification process for the non-traditional method. So
there's a lot.
That'll be something to follow.
There's a lot on the table. So, I mentioned earlier the Colorado County Clerks group supports it. There was a lot of resistance in the beginning to this. There was concern. But in doing research with other states that do have uniform voting system, quite a few of the clerks have done a 180. The reasons are cost savings, the economy of scale in purchasing the equipment at the state level. But then on the other flip side, there's also a concern that a vendor could monopolize, and drive the costs. So there are concerns out there. The uniform voting system, it provides, everyone's talking the same language. We're using the same processes across the state. The advantages of that as well, consistent processes, training. We can work with our neighbor counties on training and share. So there's the economy of scales with that. Right now, if we look for training, we're usually going to a vendor to secure the training rather than utilizing experts from other counties or from the state level. Right, it eliminates the array of different rules that we have to comply with from the Secretary of State, because we have 4 systems, there's different rules for certification of equipment, so it unifies that into one rulemaking on one system, so that simplifies, takes away some of the complexity with utilizing different systems. And it benefits, I think, our constituents because we are consistent from county to county. And we know what we're talking about throughout the state, consistency. It's one language. So those are the benefits that the clerks see in implementing the system. The other thing is, it was brought up that does Secretary of State Gessler need to bring forward legislation in order to implement a uniform voting system? He doesn't. He is working with the state treasurer right now to see if he can create a bond and move that through legislation for approval. So if there are counties that need assistance through bond to purchase equipment, we will not be required to go on the system. There are a couple counties that need to purchase new equipment real soon. We in Pickens County, our equipment will be 15 years old in 2 years, so our equipment's aging, and right now we can't get replacement parts that we're not manufacturing. So I am concerned with the age of our equipment and where we'll be moving from. So I did put together some numbers for you, so you realize we do have in our replacement budget $238,000 to replace our equipment. That's based on 2000, the cost of purchase 2000. And if we were to replace our equipment today, it would cost us, and I talked to 2 different vendors, so I averaged this out. So this is an average. It could cost about $340,000 to replace our equipment. If the new bill is implemented, I calculated and I averaged this out, it would cost us about $240,000. So that's a $100,000 difference. Another option that Bill has talked to me about and brought up is we could go to central count. What does that mean? We aren't deploying equipment at the service centers and having individuals cast them into a machine, but they're casting a ballot in a box, we're bringing it back here, and we're running everything through one central computer, which is a stronger, more industrial piece of voting machine. So that is that to go to that type of system is $210,000 average. So it's just a couple $100,000. So does that answer the questions or concerns that you may have had regarding?
Yeah, I had emailed Janice shortly after this was first brought up at CCI, which was interesting because I said, well, this is one thing, but what about a changing of the rules, which has now been that other bill? And at least they're separated out. I do take comfort in that there was a very stringent criteria developed with the county commissioners, so items such as a paper trail are still, fully in play. It is not a touchscreen system. There will be a paper ballot for everyone, and there'll be ability to, recount the votes without just having to depend on a computer chip to have a good memory. Things like that. And it does seem like there might be a reduced number of voting machines necessary if you're having less polling places and more mail-in ballots, so that could be a cost savings to the overall system. And you already mentioned the quote monopoly issue, but I was assured that they're going to write the contract in such a way that should there be system failures, there warranty expectations or refunds of money or things like that, so that it would seem like once you've all started buying your dishes from one restaurant supplier and you break a few dishes, you've got to keep buying from the same supplier or you'll be mismatched and it get very hard to change horses. And you gave some sort of example of a different system that either the clerks or maybe it was human services were able to really enforce that sort of warranty expectations and make sure that the system does everything that's delivered, because the background at the state level, my concerns were raised by the whole Colorado benefits management system, which was a computerized system for allocating your Medicaid benefits and food stamps and things like that, and that has just been a continued working disaster with various patches and upgrades that I think even this year was like another 17 million or something like that. So that would be my big concern of just making sure that it is both vetted in its, proficiency and reliability up front, but then there are guarantees from the manufacturers that, we won't be locked into a system we're constantly patching.
So, what do you, any anticipation in terms of when your committee will come to a conclusion, or when the Secretary of State will make a decision? A year away, or do you have any sort of time frame?
That is a wonderful question. Secretary of State has a timeline currently. I personally don't believe it's tenable. He wants to have the entire process wrapped up, and he's looking for deployment between the primary and general election of next year. There are very few people who feel that that's a workable timeline for this. Needless to say, he's still pushing that timeline.
There's reason for it too, is we have 2 counties that do not have paper verify, and according to statute, they have to replace their systems by 2014.
Yeah.
So if he's working in tandem with that timeline.
It seems like you might be able to, at least the selection of the vendor, go forward, get to that point, and then those counties can purchase the equipment that will work in the future system, but not necessarily have to have all 64 counties
Right.
moving
We'd
at the
like
same
to see,
time. Yeah, so.
counties come on board as they need it, which will be a challenge too, but, yeah.
Okay. No other questions? Thank you for a great comprehensive presentation.
Thank you for listening.
And we'll talk implementation again later on.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd appreciate the help on that, because if we could get community input or your thoughts on strategically where we should put boat centers, and they have to have live. John Lloyd has already talked to us about setting it up. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, good, thanks.
So with that, we're done for the day. I believe so, unless there's any other open discussion from the board.
No, great. So grassroots, thank you. We'll be back here at noon tomorrow for our regular meeting.
Thank you.
George, can I grab you and Rachel?